Actually, it just rained yesterday, but yeah, people drive like morons. But hey, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
I'd be like, hey, bro, it's just rain. You can still hit the gas, bro. It's okay.
Yeah,
It's okay. You
I
still hit
was
the gas.
thinking people were overreacting, and then I jumped onto the 290 exit to get here, and there was three people that were like on the side of the road, like in the ditch. So I'm like, you people either just don't know how to drive, or you just are scared of the rain. But either way, it's sad.
Right.
All right, guys, let's get into some business first before we jump into the fun stuff. As you guys know, RM Talk. We've been telling you guys a lot about Rolling Meadows Talk. It's a new local news offer website for the northwest suburbs of Chicago. We're talking. Steve, can you move that to the right for me a little bit? Yeah, sorry, the camera's blocking it. Yeah, so we've been talking about Rolling Meadows Talk for a couple weeks now. Local news and offer website for the northwest suburbs of Chicago. We gave you guys the idea of the local deals, the events, business directory, and lots more on the website. The website is rmtalk.com. RM as in Rolling Meadows Talk, TALK.com. We do our live shows in Rolling Meadows at Reps Place Sports Bar, as you guys know. And obviously it's a small business, a family-owned business, and we definitely want to support small businesses now more than ever. So continue to support them, support our local small businesses in all of the areas if you can. And if you guys are in the area or the surrounding areas, rmtalk.com is the website. You can check out local offers and news there. We talked about the gift card giveaway, which is essentially just going and being able to buy a gift card for yourself or a family member or a friend or whatever, and you get a free gift card as a result of that. So all you have to do is go in and basically click on the banner that says buy one, get one free. It's pretty obvious there. It gives you a really nice idea of exactly what to expect. You're going to be going in to Rep Place using the offer code. You'll receive an additional gift card when you purchase a gift card. So $100 will get you $25 extra. Yeah, 25 is $5 extra, and then 50 is $10 extra. So like I said, you go to rmtalk.com, and then you go to the banner that says to buy one, get one free, and then it'll say claim your offer below, and claim offer here, and basically you'll save your coupon code, present it when you get to Rep's Place, and you will get a free gift card as a result of giving to somebody else this holiday season. So again, guys, it's rmtalk, rollingmeadowstalk.com. Check them out on Facebook as well, and again, continue to support our local businesses here as you know, they sorely need us at this point. All right, business out of the way.
All right. Yeah. So let me kick this off. Because,
all right, go right ahead, sir.
I was getting just a little bit fired up before we got onto the show.
Yeah.
And where I want to start is college football.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, I don't know if it was last week or the week prior, we were kind of getting on Dabble Sweeney for opening his stupid ass mouth, saying stuff, you know, more or less towards Florida State, because obviously Florida State a couple weeks ago canceled the game due to COVID concerns, and
right.
Dabo came out and said they were using it because they were scared to face Clemson and all this other nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
But then he opened his mouth again this past week, and actually Dabo, for maybe the first time all year, has made some sense. And it goes around the playoffs. So as you know, on last week, the Michigan Ohio State game was canceled due to Michigan's concerns over COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously a lot of Ohio State fans were upset. And what a lot of people didn't understand was that move by Michigan actually hurt Ohio State, because there is a rule where you have to play at least 6 games to be considered to play in the, I guess just in the Big Ten championship game,
mm-hmm.
and they were only at 5. And so that means that technically the winner of this, I think it was either Northwestern or somebody else, actually had the chance to get into the Big Ten championship game. And now the NCAA, or not the NCAA, but the Big Ten is now thinking about reversing that rule, to allow Ohio State to get into the Big Ten championship game without having to play the necessary 6 games. And I have an issue with this because now we are now in the second time in the last 4 years where the overrated Ohio State Buckeyes have found some way to get into a position they have no right or nor deserves to be in.
Yeah.
Look no further than 2 years ago when they lost to Penn State. Penn State ends up in the championship game, ends up winning the Big Ten, but because for some reason Ohio State was the number 2 team in the country, both based on the USA Today poll and the AP poll, and since they never lost a game after that, and the committee is basically picked out it's now by man, it's no longer by computer, it's all by man. For some reason, the dumbass committee found no reason how to knock Ohio State out of 2 and actually put a Big Ten champion in that 14 playoff. Here we are again, where the Big Ten has no one to blame but themselves because they came to the game a lot later than almost the rest of the NCAA football, with the exception of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And now we're going to give the overrated Ohio State Buckeyes another free pass to get somewhere where they don't belong.
Yeah.
I think it's a total joke, and it's the one thing that kills me the worst about the NCAA is, for some reason, it feels like the football side, in my opinion, can never seem to get it right. And I feel like there's so much of this controversy when it comes to NCAA football, because I understand that there's a lot of money that's involved in a lot of this stuff. But where I get confused is how many times do we give Ohio State the overrated Ohio State Buckeyes another free pass? Because what Dabo said, I thought made a lot of sense is, here's the Texas A&M team who's 10-1, and their only loss came to Alabama, which they fought hard and almost beat Alabama in, who happens to be the number 1 or 2 team in the country. So the number 5 team, according to the playoff committee, is A&M, and their worst loss is to Alabama, which was only by like 7 points, if I'm not mistaken, who's the number 1 team in the country. Meanwhile, you have Ohio State, who only played 5 games. You're telling me that a 5-0 late to the game Ohio State team is better than a 10-1 Texas A&M team, who, oh, by the way, plays in probably the toughest conference in all of college football?
Yeah.
It is a joke. So here's what I'm saying with the NCAA. The NCAA is at a point now to where they need to expand the playoff. And they need to expand the playoff to where it needs to be your 5 power conference champions and then 3 at-large teams. If the NCAA 2 division, or the, what do they call that? Not the full
1A or
not the FCB, but they call it something else. But it's basically Division 2. If they can figure this out, somehow the NCAA Bowl Championship Series, what they used to call it, can somehow figure this mess out. Because if you can't figure it out, dude, I hate to say this, go back to the BCS. Because I can only remember one solid time where the BCS ever got it wrong, where you just had number 1 versus number 2. But Ohio State, there should be no reason why they get yet another free pass to get into the position that they're in right now. I think it's a joke.
It's got to be a financial thing, right? Like that's another thing that really kills me with the NCAA is like they're not even coy or like secretive about their greed. Like it's like clearly something where they know Ohio State is going to make them more money, and it seems like they're going to do everything they can to push them in. So to me, I thought you hit you hit it on the head with one specific point, which is like you were late to the party. Like the SEC and the ACC, as much crap as you want to give them about maybe they took some liberties when it came to COVID, and maybe they weren't exactly ready to get out there and do what they needed to do. Putting all that aside, they did it, and now the season is what it is. And as you can see, most of those teams got to play a full season. So,
right.
I think the one thing that's super nefarious is that not only did you squeeze them in, but you changed the rule. Like, you went in and changed a governing rule to make that happen. If that's not obvious, I don't know what is.
Right, exactly. And again, it's I don't know, dude. I'm not saying that I hate Ohio State. I just think Ohio State is the most overrated team in all of college football. Their players I shouldn't say their players. That's too strong. Because Chase Young is doing a monstrous job in Washington. And we just saw, this past, Monday night, on how good Chase Young can really be.
Mm-hmm.
As far as, how I feel about Ohio State quarterbacks, I don't think they really pan out. We're seeing Ezekiel Elliott might as well start putting the O word around him because he's falling off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
I just think
wide receivers is the only thing.
It's just overrated.
Yeah, wide receivers is the only thing that they've been able to be like bona fide at. Otherwise, I think, defensively, here's my problem with it, right? It has less to do with Ohio State and more to do with the NCAA and the way that they treat schools like Ohio State. And that includes a lot of these teams in the SEC and in the ACC, and that includes Clemson, and that includes Alabama because, as a fan, first of all, it's hard for me to get into college football because I don't really have a team. Like I follow Northwestern more than anything, but I don't really necessarily have a team. And one of the reasons why is just because like it's so non-transparent as far as like even going back to the BCS. Like I get it, the BCS was not perfect. It certainly had a lot of flaws, and I think the main thing that we all knew was that this needed to be expanded. You need to have more teams to be in the mix right now. I agree. One thing I will ask you is that because you talked about the 8-team playoff, that makes a lot of sense to me in the grand scheme of things. But one of the pushbacks about the expanded playoff is that basically the schools cannot sort of handle that type of schedule, and that you would have to basically make some cancellations happen during the season, or you'd have to shorten the regular season in order to make those extra games happen. It seems like the NCAA is hell-bent on not playing extra games. They want to play the 11-plus games that they're used to playing, and then get into the college playoff system. So what would your sort of I guess what would your pitch be on that? Because I think you need more teams. I think it's obvious you need more teams, but how much money they make on the bowls and how much money that they make on this next 4-week stretch between the end of December and the second week of January is where they make most of their money. So how do you sort of resolve the issues that they have with expanding the playoffs?
I mean, my thing would say the best thing I could say is potentially is starting the season a little bit earlier.
Okay.
So you can get those extra couple of weeks.
Sure.
Like that's the best thing that I can say, because you can't say get rid of some of the bowl games, because if you think about it, a lot of your bowl games, I don't want to say lesser bowl games, but I guess it's what it is for what it's worth. Take some of your lesser bowl games. I can't say get rid of some of those. I can't say that, because then you're going to cheat some of the schools out of it. So just start the season a couple of weeks early. You're already doing spring games.
Mm-hmm.
You're already practicing in the summer.
Yeah.
So instead of starting, because the NFL season obviously starts in September usually. So, and the college football usually starts maybe, 2 weeks before the NFL season. You're going to tell me you can't start in the beginning of August?
Sure. Yeah.
Why not start at the beginning of August? That's 2 extra weeks.
And maybe
that's usually all you're going to need to go from, because think about it, in the 14th playoff, you play potentially let's just say the Rose Bowl, and then maybe the Sugar Bowl.
Mm-hmm,
and then the next championship game is at the Orange Bowl
sure.
whatever.
Sure.
You get what I'm saying?
You can shift some things around.
So now you're at a point where you can throw in, either you can have these guys play in certain bowl games, or you could just have them play at a neutral field, or the NCAA can figure it out. I'm pretty sure there's millions of dollars worth of genius. I like that could figure this out. But to cheat out Texas A&M, who's had an amazing year, to throw in Ohio State because they're undefeated, I still think it's a joke. And I think Dabo, for as much as an idiot that I think he is from a time-to-time basis, I think really nailed it on the head when he was like, dude, you're going to have to do something. Either you're going to have to be like, look, Ohio State, we love you and everything, but you were late to the party, and Texas A&M has a better body of work than what you do, and that's what's supposed to be added in when it comes to this playoff. Yeah. Like, it's not supposed to be just, well, it's win-loss, win-loss. Because, and I said this just a little bit earlier, a 10-1 Texas A&M team whose worst loss was to Alabama is much better than anything Ohio State has done this year so far. Yeah,
no, that's true. And honestly, take a couple of those cupcake games out. Like, no reason to play Appalachian State or, Middle Tennessee State or, some of these teams that are just easy wins. And really, essentially, I watched a documentary, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but it talked about the sort of weird system that college teams have where it's like Alabama's going to pay your school $300,000 to come get their ass kicked on Saturday. And the schools are like, all right, we'll take it, because they need the money. And that to me is just really ruining the integrity of the game. And, I don't want to get all crazy on this specific topic, but to me, this just really shows that there was no reason to have a season this season. I know that's probably an unpopular opinion. First of all, none of these kids are getting paid. And that is one of the toughest sort of things for me to stand by and watch is that these companies are still making money hand over fist. The networks are making money hand over fist. ESPN and, ABC and NBC for Notre Dame and Fox and CBS. These guys are all making so much money off of these kids who get paid nothing other than the, excitement of being on a college football team. And most of the players who were smart, or not necessarily smart, but most of the players who had smart representation sat out the season because they were like, listen, like you're going to be in the NFL in a couple of years or next year, so just sit out the season. So this was just another example for me of like pro sports. I can get behind that. There is a couple 100,000 people that are depending on their livelihood for the NBA to start or for the NFL to start, or the NHL or the MLB. But the NCAA, all I picture is just a bunch of, older men in a boardroom like Mr. Burns, like, twiddling their fingers together like, ooh, what are we going to do, So
the cash grab,
exactly. Bro. So to me, that's why, honestly, I've sort of detached myself from the NCAA as a whole. Like even now with college basketball, I'm having a hard time with this too because I feel bad for these kids, and like these kids are let's take out everybody who's not in the top 25 or top 50 program in the country. But if you're at Kentucky, you went to Kentucky and you committed to Kentucky because more than likely you have hoop dreams, right? And you're trying to find the next level for you. So I have a hard time watching that and seeing these guys sort of force that in. And again, it's to me the NCAA, until they make like major changes across the board, they're going to lose people more and more every year.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And like I said, dude, as far as I'm concerned, dude, I feel like with NCAA, especially with football and basketball, it's a cash grab because the NCAA cannot afford to not have another tournament like they didn't, like they unfortunately had to do last year. They can't afford that.
Right.
You know how much money I know that they lost out of that?
Billions.
And I think that's why they're trying to force that down. You can't try and con and sucker me to think that the NCAA actually cares about some of these kids going into the pros.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? With no tournament.
Mm-hmm.
You honestly think that the NCAA was like, look. We know you guys are trying to be pros, so what we're going to do is we're going to get the season started. So no, they're like, no, we need a tournament because we need that Capital One money.
You're right. Yeah,
we need that
Chick-fil-A money.
McDonald's money.
Yeah.
Or whoever else.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
And I've said on this show many a times that the NCAA is the biggest pimp organization in all the organizations in America, period. Because this is the same organization that got sued by former players because they're like, okay, we love NCAA 14 just as much as the next person, but this guy eerily plays a lot like Reggie Bush, and you're going to put Reggie Bush's number on there. You're going to put his attributes on there, but you think you're slick by not putting his name on there?
Lance Johnson.
And you know there's nerds, right? And you know that there's nerds everywhere who take the time to actually make names, for people.
Yep.
So somehow people are either getting paid for putting the names up there, EA Sports and the NCAA are getting paid for the game, but somehow the student athlete saw none of that check.
Yeah.
And the NCAA just pimped these kids between the basketball game, EA Sports made it a baseball game, and we all know about the football game, have pimped these kids for the longest. And that's what they're doing now. I feel like they're pimping them out.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. What you said, that there shouldn't have probably never been a season. Either everyone's playing at the same time or everyone's not.
Right.
But let me tell you something else, too. I'm glad you brought something up. Do you know that both Ohio State and Texas A&M were both off the week when Michigan decided to cancel against Ohio State? Really? You're going to tell me these two teams couldn't have talked and said, hey, man, look, we got the week off. You got the week off. You was looking to play. Right. We're looking to play. Let's make a deal out of this. We'll find somewhere neutral. How about Indianapolis? We could be halfway. How about St. Louis and the Dome? We could be halfway. We can meet somewhere halfway and make this happen.
Yeah.
Ohio State never budged. I know they weren't going to, because the overrated-ass Ohio State Buckeyes are prone for wanting to play all the weak competition in the Big Ten. And then when it comes to these big boys like Alabama, like Oregon, because I know they lost to Oregon one year. And there was another team that they gotten smoked by, Clemson. Another one. Yeah. They're not ready for those teams because that's not who Ohio State is. No. Because I tell you right now, if Texas A&M would have offered up that call and Ohio State, okay, we'll take you on to try and bolster up because either way, whichever team wins is going to automatically be in the playoff, regardless, whether it be Ohio State or whether it be Texas A&M. I'm letting you know right now, Ohio State would have got their ass whooped because they are not ready for a team like Texas A&M.
And the
it's
reason
easy to beat up on Purdue and Iowa and Indiana,
Minnesota,
and Penn State is not that good this year. It's easy to beat up on those guys,
right?
But how about we play a Texas A&M team in the SEC who almost beat the number one team in the country?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
I think the easy answer to that, and I think you knew that, it was a rhetorical question, but I think the easy answer to that is that Ohio State was like, fuck that. We know the NCAA is going to help us out anyways, so why even do that, right? I think, that's really the major issue with this, right, is that schools sort of operate like factions of the mob, and it's like, we're all a part of the mob, right? Like, I'm just here on 5th Street and they're the 7th Street, but I'm a part of the mob, they're a part of the mob. We're going to figure something out, right? There's always a deal that we can kind of come to. So that's the problem, is there's no transparency in the process. And also, you mentioned it too, the lack of transparency in like how is it that the ACC and the SEC came to the decision like this, had a schedule like this, we're ready like this, but the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the rest of these conferences were like, dragging their feet and maybe saying maybe we shouldn't, or maybe we'll just cancel. Remember, the Big Ten was one of the first conferences like, we're going to cancel all the games of this current season, and then when they saw the SEC and ACC were not doing too bad, they're like, never mind, maybe we'll come back just a little bit later. To me, they all had the same set of information to make a decision off of. It's not like, we're living in a different world than Alabama and Texas A&M and everybody in the SEC or everybody in the ACC. Right. We're all living in the same damn country. So I think the really easy answer to that is just that there's no accountability. They know there's no accountability. I mean, even like, this is a petty example to give, but like, look at the whole Urban Meyer situation and what happened with Urban Meyer and that weird coach that they had who was like abusing his wife, and then Urban Meyer's like has quote unquote, sickness, but not really. He's fine, but he's got, and it's just, there's no accountability. There's no transparency. You get to do what you want. We'll sweep this under the table. We'll put our PR people on it, and we'll just move on with our lives. And that's why you see, like, I think it's Ryan Day is the new coach, right? Of Ohio State. And like, even this guy, they're showing him having the same links that Urban Meyer had to that one alleged coach who was abusing his wife. So to me, dude, this is like very clearly that people like you and I, we want to see accountability. We want to see the transparency. We want to be able to see that this is a legitimate process. And to me, it's very clear right now that I think everybody who's paying attention realizes this isn't a very transparent process. And on top of that, there's really no hope for accountability because we know that the money's too big and, the entity is too big. And the NCAA, dude, I will put, there's two organizations in the world that, like, again, are run by Mr. Burns. The NCAA and FIFA. Those two organizations are run by the most corrupt, just absolute open mob. The FIFA's has had lawsuits after lawsuits over the last 10 years because they just don't give a fuck. They know that they run the town and they're going to do what they can. And then, you know what? If you're going to catch me, throw me that slap on the wrist. I'll take the slap on the wrist and I'll move on with my life.
Yeah, you ain't lying about that FIFA one, because I remember when they were having all kinds of issues as far as with the World Cup a couple of World Cups ago when it was supposed to be played here, but then they went and just all kinds of nonsense. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, and really all it came down to, Nick, it was like people think that there's this like weird system. I don't even think it's that. Some dude showed up with a briefcase full of money and was like, "Oh, you want to go to America? Click, click." Open up that bag, and the dude just starts shoveling money in the bag. All right, cool, we'll make this happen. So that's, to me, it's very simple that, one of the main issues with a lot of these sort of organizations is just the pure greed, like the greed of like knowing that you have, FIFA, we in America don't really understand the gravity of FIFA, UEFA, and some of these sort of organizations that run football around the world, because every other country in the world pretty much gives a fuck except us. And we sort of have too much on our plate as it is with the sports that we deal with. So we don't really realize, and again, NCAA, they've done it under our nose for so many years. And then expose after expose, we see these like weird, characters doing nefarious things, and there's nothing we can do about it. And one thing I do want to hit on, because I want to transition a little into some basketball, because I was watching some preseason basketball yesterday, and you mentioned the fact that, how damaging it was to not have a tournament last year. And that's something that I will acknowledge, because one thing that I think was very clear was that you and I both know there's a lot of players over the last 10, 15 years who are in college basketball and then got to play in March and change their whole career off of 1 month worth of games, including March Madness, right? So we didn't get to have that this year. And that's something I didn't really, I don't think either of us did take into consideration when we were doing draft coverage. You're talking about all these draft guys and all these prospects, but really we never really got to see a lot of these guys in the games that really matter most. And like Patrick Williams is an example of that. Obi, for New York is a great example of that too. So to me, that's the one example you can give me that will make me say, okay, we can force in a tournament next year or something like that. I think, vaccines are kind of coming and things are getting a little bit better on that front, and the safety seems to be a little bit higher for the public. But it's staggering to see, the Bulls picked up an undrafted free agent in, I think it's DeMar Dotson. He's from Kansas. And this kid was one of the best players in college basketball, but he went undrafted because he didn't have the opportunity to show that he can be a floor general for a team during March Madness, and that killed him, and he went undrafted.
Right. And then also too, what was I going to say? Oh, I agree with you on that, because the one guy that's always stuck out with me, a guy who improved his draft stock just by playing in March, without question, was Wally Zerbiak.
Oh,
because
yeah.
I remember watching college basketball that entire year. I had no idea who this kid was.
Mm-hmm.
He went on this 3-game stretch where this man dropped like 30 a game for Miami of Ohio and got them to the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
And all he did was turn that performance into being the 10th overall pick by the Minnesota Timberwolves that year.
Yeah.
So I agree with you on that, and that's why I think the March Madness tournament is so important for these kids per se, because like you said, you sometimes you get a lot of people don't watch outside of what ESPN puts out there for us. So a lot of people don't see outside of, we know that the ACC per se is the cream of the crop when it comes to college basketball. So you're not going to see, the Florida State versus Dukes, because Florida State all of a sudden just have come out of nowhere, and Leonard Hamilton has done such a great job with that program over the years.
Yeah.
And then we see the UNC Duke, we always see that rivalry. And then, North Carolina State is in the mix somewhere in there. And the Big Ten is a right close second behind them.
Mm-hmm.
We just saw just the other day, we saw Illinois go to Duke and beat the smoke out of them.
Yep.
Obviously it's not the same, it's not the same field house in Duke, obviously. But that's still a road game that Illinois came out there and beat Duke by 18 points.
Yeah.
So you have Illinois that's out there. The overrated Ohio State somehow gets mixed in there. We saw Northwestern go on an incredible run a couple of years back. And even some local teams, like we saw Loyola make its way all the way to the Final Four 1 year. So it's just all kinds of craziness, and we didn't get that this year. So I'm with you. I think some of the stock on some of these guys really went down because with there being no tournament, you're really just getting regular season tape.
Yeah.
But the Bulls pick, in my opinion, not so much that we'll see what we can get out of Patrick Williams this year, but you said it maybe a couple weeks ago when Patrick Williams was drafted. This might be one of those picks where you can't evaluate for another maybe 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Because the Bulls scouting team had to have seen something to have a guy who barely hit 10 points a game coming off the bench to make him the number 4 overall pick.
Yeah.
To pick over guys like Obi, who had himself a pretty decent game against Detroit last night, and some of the other guys that got drafted, between the Bulls and maybe the 10th pick, where like the kid from Israel could have been a good pick for the Bulls. The Bulls could have went with, but they saw something in Patrick Williams. So again, that's a pick that that's a pick where if there was a tournament, maybe there's not so many questions.
Right.
Because you would have seen Patrick Williams come out like, man, did you see how raw he was in like the round or in the quarterfinals? Or look how great he was in the Sweet 16. Look how he snapped off in the Elite 8 to get Florida State in the Final Four. We didn't have that this year, and I think that's why there's so many questions, specifically really around that pick.
Right.
Because you knew that Patrick Williams was good, but was he worth the 4th overall pick? But if we had a tournament, these questions, we're not even having this conversation.
100%.
So I agree with you on that I think a lot of these kids missed out on the tournament for them to get that last-minute ditch effort for the scouts to notice them and say, hey, maybe we should take a page out on this kid.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and that's actually why I specifically brought it up, because one of the huge points of the broadcast for the Bulls broadcast was that I think Florida State ended the season at number 2 in the country or something. I think they were top 5 in the country before this.
Remember, they won the ACC tournament.
Right.
Technically, the ACC tournament didn't go, but they won the ACC. They were declared champions once the COVID happened, and I think that team really would have went deep.
And that's.
I'm not saying they would have won the whole thing, but they could have easily have gone to the Final Four.
You're echoing exactly what Stacey King was saying, which was basically that this was a team, by the way, Florida State does not like to play freshmen too much. They're not huge on giving freshmen shots. So, somebody like Patrick Williams, who's a sixth man, you mentioned it, his numbers don't pop out to you. You're not looking at him and going, oh my God, like this guy is a world beater based off numbers. But that would have been a guy who, I think what would have happened is, if he would have played in the tournament, people would have been lauding the Bulls for saying, my God, what a great pick. Because you know what? I don't think he would have done anything to put himself above Weissman, Ball, or Edwards. But man, oh man, I think the Bulls saw the writing on the wall, which is that people are underrating this guy a little bit. Maybe we are overrating him a little bit. But the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I'll tell you this, just based off of one game, I can see why the Bulls selected him. He's 19 years old. He already looks like a pro. He's got, he doesn't play like a rookie. He's got a very calm demeanor on the court. He's not rushing too much. He's got a really nice flow and smooth game. He's got a lot of improvements to make, though, too. And the one thing that I think is good for him is that he's going to force himself on the floor this year. And that's something I think you'll see with Obi and something we'll see with, some of these other top 10 picks who maybe not a lot of people are expecting out of. But when you talk about like the Knicks with Julius Randle and Mitch Robinson, and Nerlens Noel and some of these other big men that they have, where's Obi in the grand scheme of things? And I think you could say the same thing about the Bulls with Lauri Markkanen, who's on the last year of a deal. He might have to get paid after this season. Are the Bulls going to be the one to pay him? And then you've got Patrick Williams behind Otto Porter. You've got him behind Chandler Hutchinson. We already have two centers. So I think the real big thing is the rookies like that are going to force their way out onto the floor, and that's what you need to see. You need to see a little bit of that, okay, they're advanced. They're a little bit more advanced than we were giving them credit for, and I think that was the impression I got out of Patrick Williams. By the way, the Bulls got absolutely smoked by the Houston Rockets last night, and John Wall looked really good, and the Boogie Cousins look pretty good. And I want to ask you a question too, because while we were gone, James Harden, we knew he wanted out, but then he added some teams to his list and said, okay, I'll go to Miami, I'll go to Milwaukee, I'll go here, I'll go there, Philadelphia. Honestly, dude, I would make the case that this is the best team that they've had in Houston since he's been in Houston. Like, I'm flabbergasted that he is now wanting out, because if you look at it, by the way, John Wall and Boogie Cousins are good friends, both went to Kentucky. They made some really nice moves, including Christian Wood from Detroit, who had like a career season with Detroit. He's going to be a really nice piece for them. They still got P.J. Tucker. They still got Daniel House. They still got Gerald Green. They still got all these guys that he loves. So I'm not seeing. I think Harden maybe is a little bit nervous to bank on Boogie Cousins and John Wall. But what do you think about that whole thing? Because clearly right now Houston is not as bad as Harden is trying to make them out to be.
I'm with you on that, and I'm starting to wonder if there has to be something internally that's going on.
Right.
I don't know if James Harden is upset that they got rid of D'Antoni, because we know how much of an offensive juggernaut that James Harden has become. Mm-hmm. And we know that Mike D'Antoni, in his 7 seconds or less philosophy, we've seen his numbers go up. So I don't know if maybe somewhere James Harden is a little upset that they kind of forced D'Antoni's hand to make him leave, and now he's going to have to actually maybe play defense.
Right.
I think that's why he's so gung-ho about wanting to go to Brooklyn. There's going to be absolutely no defense played on that team.
Right,
Nothing. No offense to anybody, but Kyrie's not that great defensively. Kevin Durant, believe it or not, for the offensive juggernaut that he isn't that great offensively. Mm-hmm. Defensively.
Defensively, right.
And James Harden isn't that great defensively.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can force your hand and try and go to Brooklyn all you want to, but when you're dropping 140, but nobody on your team can play defense, so they're dropping 150, then what's the point?
Right, what's the point? Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I think James Harden is almost do. Am I wrong of thinking that maybe he might be a little bit salty because now he may not be quote unquote the guy on there? Because think about it, dude. DeMarcus Cousins, when healthy, is one of the best scoring centers in the league. John Wall has never really been a guy like he can score. Don't get me wrong, he can score, he can make plays, but the offense now, like with Russell Westbrook had to shoot. And Westbrook had to have the ball in his hands. I mean, John Wall kind of needs the ball in his hand, but he doesn't necessarily need to shoot. So I wonder if somewhere down the line, James Harden is thinking, man, bringing these guys in, now I got to share the ball. Now, I can't shoot it the way I want to. This, that, and everything else. Or maybe it's something internally that's going on that's making him think the way that he wants to. Like, I don't know if he's still bothered by, I think it was the owner of the Rockets.
Right,
who had his, who showed his favoritism towards Trump. I'm not sure if he's, still, holding a grudge against that. You never know. But, yeah, I think it's kind of crazy because if I was James Harden, I'm thinking like, man, if John Wall can stay healthy and DeMarcus Cousins can stay healthy, I'm not saying we can beat the Lakers, but man, we ain't gonna go down 4-1 like we did last year.
Yeah.
And so I think you bring up a good question, but I think something's going on internally we don't necessarily know about.
Yeah, and also I think, one thing I will say is that it's not like they went from like okay, I know it's preseason. Trust me, I'm not. Don't jump on my throat if you're listening to this and saying, "Oh, it's preseason." But that team last night looked a lot like a D'Antoni-led team. Like it did not look like they were went from this end of the spectrum to this. Right? It's like they looked a lot like the team that we had seen over the last 3 years. And I was surprised by it because it's hard to play that style of ball with a center like Boogie, but they did it. And they were chucking up threes and they were making threes and they were doing really well. Now, granted, the Bulls suck and don't really have what they need to be able to stop that, but I just started to evaluate the team and look at who's on the floor. Eric Gordon is a guy we haven't mentioned. I mean, I know he's kind of had up and down seasons himself and injuries, but that's not a bad team in Houston. And I think one thing that has become apparent is Brooklyn's not clamoring to go and get him right now. I just don't think, I think they're still in a phase right now where they want to see, because Brooklyn is pretty deep. I mean, they are right now, they're pretty deep. If you bring in James Harden, you give up all of that depth. And you give up your sixth man, you give up your starting center, you give up one of your best shooting guards, and likely picks as well. So, I think the one thing with the NBA that I think we're going to see more than anything, and I want your opinion on this too, your team and I and mine are both in this situation. Our teams haven't played in months. I mean, listen, everybody who is in the bubble, it's only been 2 to 3 months since they've played. All of our teams, because they didn't do that other bubble tournament that they were thinking of doing in Chicago, the Bulls haven't played meaningful ball since February. That is a really hard thing to do. So one thing I will say is that I think bubble teams have, or last year's bubble teams, have an extreme advantage over the other teams, and that's going to make it really tough in the West too, because the West, the East had a ton of teams that were not qualified, but like Golden State, if you look at it for example, that's going to be really, granted they have the Clay injury to deal with as it is, but that's going to be really tough. They have a lot of moving parts, a lot of new guys, Andrew Wiggins, Kelly Oubre. That team is not going to just pick up where it left off, So, I think there's a severe advantage for some of these teams, including teams like the Lakers and the Clippers and everything like that. Say what you want about the Clippers. It did not end well. They're bickering amongst each other. There's a lot of talk about favoritism. They just gave Paul George a Supermax extension and paid him.
I feel about that. Hey, and I'm glad you brought that up, dude, because that extension to me doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because nothing against Paul George, but What have you seen out of Paul George in the last X amount of years that said, okay, you know what, the 5-year 226 max is what we're going to give him?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? He's
Yeah.
a good player. He's a good complementary piece, but that's a 5-year 226 makes sense for LeBron. It makes sense for AD. It makes sense for like maybe a Steph before he got hurt. You know, it makes sense for James Harden. That's for
Devin
guys
Booker,
who make sense to. Paul George doesn't make sense unless you make that deal because you're uncertain of what's going through the head of Kawhi Leonard. Because I am maybe one of the few people that thinks that Kawhi Leonard should have never left Toronto. When you forced your hand out of San Antonio, you get traded to the Toronto Raptors. Kawhi reminds me, mindset-wise, a lot of Giannis. That's why when have you ever noticed that Giannis, his name when it comes to where he's gonna go, it's all to these middle market teams, Miami, Dallas, potentially staying in Milwaukee. Because, and I swear he said it, where he said he wasn't really interested in going to a big market team like New York, like both LAs, like Chicago, like, you know, some of these other ones. I think Kawhi was in that same boat where, yeah, he had the falling out with Greg Popovich and whatever. I'm not saying Toronto was San Antonio, but they're both like two small market teams. Like Toronto's technically the only team that's in Canada right now, but it doesn't have the same flair as New York, Chicago, LA. Yeah. You know, I guess I would even put Miami up in that point because they've become a very reputable destination for NBA players to go to, especially with them coming out of the finals last year. So maybe you can throw them up there. But Toronto was finna give you the whole country.
Right,
Screw Ontario.
Yeah. Right,
They're
yeah.
like, we're just gonna speak for the entire country of Canada.
Yeah.
And dude, you could be prime minister, head of the Royal Mounted Police.
Right.
You could go wherever you want. Even if you want to go somewhere that's closed, we'll make sure that there's chefs that stay behind you. They was finna give him the world.
They're gonna give him a free house.
Right. You go to wherever house you want. We'll put one in every province for you. You can go wherever you want. You'll always have a house. And he was so gung-ho to go back to LA and get embarrassed the way that they did.
Yeah.
And you saw how good Toronto was. Like Pascal Siakam really came up and had himself one hell of a year, you know, knowing he had to step up, knowing that Kawhi wasn't there. They went all the way to Game 7 of the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
The semifinals against Boston. You know, and let's just call it what it is. If Kawhi's there, Boston doesn't get out of it. It's Toronto v Miami in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm thinking. So let's say Kawhi comes out this year and it doesn't work with Tyronn Lue and him, because as far as Tyronn Lue is concerned, everyone is going to play. If you're healthy, you're playing.
Yeah.
I don't do low management.
Right.
I'm not Doc. You know, and if Kawhi doesn't like it, there's a good chance Toronto could go right back on the phone and say, hey, we can make a similar deal that we did for Kawhi. We'll take him right on back and we'll win championships.
Can I give you even
that's the only reason.
Can I give you an even more interesting scenario? Because this is something that I just did some research on last night, because I was wondering, first of all, I wanted to talk about the back and forth between Paul George went on Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes' podcast, All the Smoke, and I love them because they're so, like, they're instigators. They're like, we're going to get this motherfucker to say something stupid. So they're like, well, you know, how did you had an off year last year? And Paul George was like, yeah, they were kind of using me like J.J. Redick or Ray Allen or Kyle Korver, and I'm not that type. You know, I could do that, but that's just not my game, and da-da-da-da. And then Doc Rivers was like, Tyronn Lue was on my staff. He was the one who was like okaying all of this. So, and he's your coach now. But one interesting thing to take note, a lot of people don't know this. Kawhi has a player option after this year. If he wants to leave, he can leave. He can he can leave with nothing. He can leave LA with absolutely nothing after this year. So I think when you take that into consideration, it makes a little bit more sense that they felt that adamant about locking up Paul George, because if he leaves, you get nothing, and you need some. Paul George was talking about on that same podcast. Well, I went to Indianapolis. I went to Larry Bird, and I told him, let's go get AD, and he said no. What is he supposed to do? Conjure up players and draft picks and things to trade? Indiana had nothing to give New Orleans. Indiana had absolutely nothing to give New Orleans. And then he was like, "What? I told them to get 80." Like as if like that's the thing to do in this situation. Well, I told them just go trade for LeBron. How are you gonna do that, bro? You don't have the assets to do that. So I think LA is sort of hedging their bets right now because, dude, this is a huge season for them. If they don't do well, he's gone. He's got to be gone.
And going right back to Toronto and probably apologizing like, hey, I never should have.
I'm going to be honest. I'm going to keep it 100 with you. I would not at all be surprised see him take less money and team up with another big two in the East. So, listen, you and I actually said it on this show at the time. I think all of that whole, he wants to go back home, he loves LA, I thought that was all smoke and mirrors, because at the end of the day, he can always go back to LA. He is a millionaire, okay? I don't care what anybody tells me. You are a millionaire. If you want to go, if you literally want to fly to LA tonight, you can. And you can go do whatever, go to Roscoe's, do whatever the hell you want to do. You don't have to play in a team in California to, love your hometown. So, at the end of the day, I'm telling you, this guy, Kawhi is different, first of all. He's not the guy who's like, I made a mistake. To this day, he will not give up 1 inch about the whole San Antonio situation. He blames that 100% on San Antonio's front office. They did not give him the support. They rushed him back from the injury. They did a terrible job of rehabbing him. And to me, I don't even think he wants to go back to Toronto, because Toronto, it may be in a situation to do that. But I think what he's thinking is, you know what? Let me do what LeBron just did, because LeBron changed the game a little bit with that AD thing. When first of all, he showed up to LA, the team sucked. And then he went, that guy, trade them, bring in this guy, and bring in my guy. And Kawhi hasn't been able to do that with LA, with the Clippers so far, because they already they gave him the team that he wanted, and the team was stacked last year. Now you have less players, worse players in my opinion, and Paul George is supposed to be like your Robin. He's in big trouble right now.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And you know what, dude? I would almost say that if it was any other coach than Tyronn Lue, maybe I'd be like, let's give this a chance. Outside of LeBron, outside of him winning that championship and where LeBron made maybe the greatest block in NBA history, dude, what did Tyronn Lue do? Okay, so when let's compare the two, right? When LeBron left Miami I wouldn't say high and dry. Him and Pat Riley didn't get along. But when he left Miami, right? Mm-hmm. Miami was garbage, but they were still somewhat competitive.
Right.
Okay. So it was like, okay, we may have gone 34 and whatever, but a lot of our losses, we were still in. Eric Spoelstra still doing a great job coaching. We just were on the wrong side of the L that day. And we moved on, because now, what are they now? Maybe 4 or 5 years removed since LeBron left, if not a little bit more, and they were just in the NBA Finals, right? But at least Eric Spoelstra kept them competitive. But when LeBron left Cleveland, dude, they were just flat out garbage, terrible. Like Tyronn Lue looked over his head. That team wasn't that good whatsoever. They were garbage. And I'm like, dude, if Tyronn Lue would at least had Cleveland win at least 25 to 30 games, maybe you'd have been like, okay, man, he's trying what he's got. Losing LeBron is a big piece. Kevin Love can't stay healthy. Kyrie now is in Boston. This, that, and everything else. But they're still competitive. We can still do some work here with Tyronn Lue. No, there was so much ass they fired.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's why I was so like, I understand you moved away from Doc Rivers. I just didn't think that Tyronn Lue was the guy for the job.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And Doc made a good point. Like, Doc made a good point. You got rid of Doc, and then you put his best assistant in that seat, as if him and Doc weren't going back and forth about the strategy and the planning of the team as it is. So, like, you didn't like fire Doc Rivers. You downgraded from Doc Rivers to Tyronn Lue. And also you have to take into consideration, like, the West this year. I mean, I know it sounds crazy for people to hear, but the Clippers, they don't, there's no guarantee they make the playoffs. I'm sorry. But when you start to look at some of the teams, and as I did last night, because I was like, you know what, it's, we're a week away from this regular season. I want to kind of take a look at some of the teams that we're dealing with. Dude, the West is like, it's going to be a firefight in the West because just the three California teams alone with Golden State, the Clippers, and the Lakers. I know Sacramento is Sacramento, but they're an improved team with improving young players. You got Dallas, who wants to be in the mix eventually. You got the Suns, who've improved themselves. We just talked about the Rockets. We haven't even talked about like teams like New Orleans. New Orleans is going to take a step. Utah, Portland. I mean, watching Portland last night, they mashed on the Kings, and they look good, really good too. I mean, they made some moves to bring in some guys that are gonna help them, like more shooters, more defense, and as Cantor is back. I mean, that is a really, really tough conference, and if the Clippers are just automatically assuming, we're going to be in on the 3 or 4 seed, we'll get, dude, they're in for a rude awakening because there's only 8 spots in the West, and there's too many teams right now.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. But look at it like this too, dude. Could you think that maybe the Clippers are trying to catch lightning in the bottle like Toronto did?
Sure.
Because think about it. Toronto did the same thing the Clippers did. They fired what's his name? Dwayne
Casey,
Dwayne Casey.
Mm-hmm.
And then they hired Nick Nurse, who was Dwayne Casey's main assistant.
True.
And all they turned around and did. I mean, now granted, they went and traded for Kawhi, and they pretty much just rolled that wave all the way to an NBA championship. But I think here's the difference between Lue and Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse still took Toronto to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinals the next year after losing their star player. The Cleveland Cavaliers were just absolute trash-ass garbage after just LeBron. Actually, LeBron and Kyrie. So you kind of lose both your players. But again, when you had in Miami, where you had LeBron leave, Bosh had to retire because of the blood clots, and Dwayne Wade is kind of on the twilight end of his career, and they're still somewhat competitive. Yeah. You didn't get that out of Tyronn Lue. So I still think the Clippers make the playoffs, but your point is very valid, where it's like, dude, like, don't just think because both of you guys are on the squad and Ty Lue is now your coach, all of a sudden you're 3-4 because, like you said, you got L.A., Portland, Utah, Dallas, Houston. Again, we forget to keep – and them getting Steven Adams, them as in New Orleans, is going to pay dividends.
I'm telling you, dude, they're going to be good. New Orleans is going to be good this year. And one thing that I will also say is that you have to be super, super careful about, like, one injury here, one injury there, because the Clippers are a team that's, like, not super, super, super deep right now. Like, they are maybe one Kawhi injury or one Paul George injury from, like, being a team that's going to be really, really tough to win games. So, you have to – obviously, we look at preseason with a grain of salt. You're not going to ever, make a decision off of. But this year, when you have 1 week of preseason and then you are there, I mean, I think it's most teams are playing 4 games of preseason, and then you're playing for all the marbles from next Friday on. So this is going to be a season more than ever where, like, even if your team is good, but you have a couple of bad breaks and you aren't able to handle the sort of mental stability you need, you could drop, dude. Again, I'm not going to say the same thing about Brooklyn. Like, Brooklyn, they are deep, don't get me wrong, but you lose, let's say, I don't want this to happen. I would never wish injury on anyone, but like, another one of those season-ending injuries for KD, and then you basically got the same squad that you had last year, and that squad didn't do too well. And by the way, you had to like subtract from that squad a little bit as well. So, you know, and they got a new coach and a new coaching staff and a new sort of GM and new sort of mentality. You know, these are the things that are going to be really huge this season. In a shortened season, you know, that again, I think in the NHL, I do want to bring up the NHL because last week it was sort of up in the air, but as of early this week, it looks like January 13th is the start date, and the hope is that they play a shortened season. I think it was 52 games is what I was
52 or 50,
52 or 56,
52
yeah,
or 56, something like that.
Yeah. So really the hope is that you play a little bit of a shortened season starting in January, and then 21-22 you can pick up where you left off as a normal schedule. I think the NBA was trying the same thing, but you know, the NBA is a little bit more difficult because, let's say, for example, because they were so hell-bent on getting in on Christmas, that may push next year back as well, which would mean like this is going to be just like last season, a season that we've never seen before, because maybe half the season there's going to be no fans and the other half there may be. Like, we don't know yet. That's the really crazy thing about this upcoming season for both the NHL and the NBA, because like the Premier League, for example, I know it's England, so you know it's a little bit of a different ball game, but they started the first 10 games of the season, I think it was 12 games of the season with no fans. Now they have 5,000 to 10,000 fans, and then there's a couple of teams who are pushing for even, you know, upwards of 80% capacity in the next couple of months. So we're going to see the same thing here, and it's going to change things, and it's going to make it so that, listen, the best team may not win this year. We know that now. The best team may not win, and that goes for NHL as well, because that's going to be a little bit of a funky season to start in January. And is the Winter Classic, it got canceled, right?
For
NHL, the NHL, yeah, okay, yeah, because, I mean, that would have been a disaster. Oh, yeah, sorry. The NHL announced the cancellations of both the 2021 Winter Classic and the All-Star Games for next season. Still, the league maintained that the announcement had no impact on the target game on or around New Year's Day. Well, that never happened. On or around New Year's Day never happened, but that's because they were dragging their feet for a lot of that collective bargaining stuff. So, all right, yeah, we are a week away from NBA regular season basketball, so next week we will be talking about probably game one. That opening Friday looks pretty good. So lots and lots of hope for fans like us. We are 0-0, and you know, you get to start the campaign. And I don't know, how did you get a chance to watch the Knicks last night? How did they look?
I saw a little bit of them, dude, defensively. I mean, albeit it's the Pistons. The Pistons are not the best team offensively, yeah. But you can tell that Tibbs has his hands defensively on the Knicks. So I'm actually kind of anxious to see how they go on from here on out. But dude, I liked what I saw yesterday. You know, the funny thing is, Obi Toppin is he's a rookie, but the crazy part is Kevin Knox is younger than he is.
Right,
he's
that's crazy, man.
Of a pro,
yeah,
than Obi Toppin. So the thing is, dude, the Knicks as I was trying to explain, you said something earlier that I thought was maybe my favorite point of why I was okay that the Knicks didn't go out and get Russell Westbrook, was because you're going to have to give up basically a whole starting lineup plus picks for a situational problem that can't get fixed overnight. And that's how I feel, and that's why I'm okay. I was okay with the Knicks not going out there and getting them, because, yeah, the Wall Westbrook trade made sense because one guy's making $100 million and this guy's making $110 million. So sure, we'll go ahead and swap contracts. It would not have made sense with the Knicks. Plus, you're going to lose all your depth. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the Knicks, you saw a lot of that depth last night. So I really think that the Knicks, I still like where the Knicks are going. And again, it's the new regime, bro. Because if this was a past regime, if this was maybe last year's regime, if it was maybe I would even venture to say even when Phil Jackson was president of the Knicks, that deal would have been done. But with Leon Rose and what Leon Rose is doing and what this new regime is doing, I'd like the pick, even though people thought we should have got Haliburton. I still like the pick of Obi Toppin. You saw him yesterday. He's got real good post moves, very athletic with an athletic team. So let's keep on going and see what the Knicks keep doing from there. And the thing is, I wanted to say this too, was that the NBA preseason to me is a little bit different than the other ones because your guys are playing. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Like, unless your name is LeBron James or potentially one of the top 10 players in the or even 15 or 20 players in the NBA, your guys are playing. So that's like You watched Houston last night. Yes, they beat the Chicago Bulls, whatever. But of course, you're going to be a little bit on the positive side of Houston because it's John Wall playing the full game. It's Boogie playing, maybe 2 or 3 quarters, because we know he's got health issues. Mm-hmm. It's James Harden trying to mix in, and you're like, man, this team really just dropped 120 on us. Yeah, it might have been the Bulls. It might have been preseason, but they're still going full and all out. It's not like in the NFL where your top guys play one series and then that's it. And then you just save it all off. So I just think at the end of the day, I take NBA preseason maybe just a little bit more serious than everybody else because you're seeing top guys go full speed, getting their feet wet, ready for the season. Yeah. Because if the Knicks had gone out there last night and somehow the Detroit Pistons would have dropped 120, I would have come on this show absolutely pissed off. Yeah. Because I'm like, where's the changes? Right. Where were the changes? If Tom Thibodeau is supposed to be this defensive guru and we just let the no offensive Detroit Pistons put up 120 on us, I'd have been pissed. Yeah. And anyone that would have been like, well, Nick, it's just a preseason. Tell me, nah, man, because these guys are going all out.
And not this preseason in specific. Maybe in a regular preseason, I can see that. But in this preseason, where you got 4 games to get it right, there's no such thing as like too soon or hey, don't do this or don't do that, because it's like, dude, this is 4 games to determine who is ready and who's not ready for next week. So it's unprecedented, to be quite honest. We've never seen anything like this, and we're making as many adjustments as anybody else is, and I think we have to adjust our mindsets a little bit, especially like us with teams. Again, we just mentioned that we're out of the bubble, not having an opportunity to play meaningful basketball for the last 8 months now, close to. That means a lot. That is a huge deal. And I think one thing that you'll see is that those teams, no matter how improved they are, no matter how the additions that they've made, those teams are going to struggle for the first 2 or 3 weeks, and you'll see that teams that were in the bubble last year, those teams are going to do pretty well for themselves the first couple weeks because it's only, like I said, it's only been a couple months. Even teams like the Suns, teams like that were the Memphis that were eliminated out of the situation, which we didn't even mention Memphis for the West either. I mean,
Memphis is another one.
Memphis, that's another team that was very close last year and then made additions this year and actually have improving young players. So, yeah, it's hard to imagine right now a scenario where, like for example, the Bulls. I don't have high expectations for the Bulls this year, but I'm hoping for less games like last night. And I think we've talked about this on the show before. I want to be able to watch a full 4 quarters. I want to see meaningful basketball. I want to see, a game where you're not down by 30 and then, the bench is in on the game now for the last, 13 minutes. So I think we'll start to see some I'm hoping no injuries happen over the next week. I've got some fantasy. I got a fantasy league in basketball this year again. So it's going to be crazy this year because of the, who knows what's going to happen COVID-wise. I don't suspect, listen, what the NBA did in the bubble was amazing. I would imagine that they're going to try and mirror that same sort of approach when it comes to non-bubbled games. I don't know. I mean, based on what I've seen right now, everything looks pretty safe. I don't know if you've seen the new benches, but the benches are pretty spaced out now. You're not sitting right next to shoulder with people. So let's hope. All I can really hope is that both the NHL and the NBA season don't crap out on us, because if they do, we're going to be without sports for the next, let's say, 6 months.
And I'm glad you brought the NHL up, because I don't know if you had seen on my Facebook, but I had put up what did I put up? Oh, the proposed realignment for the NHL season. So basically, what you had was the All Canada division, which was Vancouver, Winnipeg, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and Calgary. So you got those teams. I think I'm missing one, but yeah, Edmonton. So you had those 7-8 teams up there. Then you had basically your all West division. So Jose, LA, Arizona, Dallas, all your Western,
yeah.
Right? Then you had all your East Coast teams. So both New York teams, Philly, the Devils, Washington,
Florida,
and then basically, actually, Florida is what I call the everybody else division, the Blackhawks.
All right, because the
Blues actually are on the Western division, but you had the Blackhawks, the Wings, the Predators, Florida, Columbus, and everyone else. And everyone's like, well, this should probably be only a one-time thing. This is a one-time thing. But I actually was sitting and thinking to myself, I'm like, why don't you just keep it? Because you have Seattle coming out, right? Where else are you going to put the Seattle Kraken?
Right.
Keep them in the West Division. What's the point? I understand why they're doing it, because Canada has been set tripping, and they've been doing it since last year about American teams coming up there to play. That's fine. But think about it, dude. As a Rangers fan, and I know that the Toronto Maple Leafs are one of the original 6, I'm not losing any sleep if they decide to move from, we were in the Metropolitan Division and they moved, to the All Canada Division, or something to that extent. I'm not losing any sleep on it. Now, if it was a rival like Philly, like the Devils, like the Fish Sticks, any of those guys, maybe. But Toronto, though, dude, all Canada in a country where Canada is pretty much king, I think that's genius. All West, where pretty much every West is genius, because I think out of everything that happened in the division realignment, the one that made the most sense to me was there was no reason why the Detroit Red Wings and the Chicago Blackhawks should have ever been separated to where the Blackhawks stay in the West and the Red Wings stay in the East. No, they're rivals.
Right.
They are original 6 rivals.
Yeah.
You should have figured something out. Either you bring Chicago to the East, or you just keep Detroit in the West.
It's funny you mention that, because I think that's a lock. I think Chicago if the Kraken, there's no way you can put them in anything but the West Division, right? Like you can't you can't do anything but that. And I think the only team that makes sense right now, actually it's one of two, because St. Louis is in the West too, right? So technically speaking, those are probably 2 teams. The Chicago Blackhawks and the Blues are probably both going to be teams that are going to be more than likely looked at, and it makes sense. Like Chicago should not be in the West. I don't care what anyone says, should not be in the West. I know the original reason why we're in the West was because of the expansion and the realignment. That shouldn't happen. And more than anything this year, the Blackhawks were like gonna maybe retool or maybe end everything this year. But they're like, you know what? Let's see how things go this year. Why not? You know, I mean, we got nothing to lose. I think there's a lot of teams with that mentality this year too, which is like, you know what, we have long-term plans that we want, but you know what? This is a crapshoot, dude. Like if we could play well for 52 to 56 games, we put ourselves in a position for the cup, and nobody's gonna say boo-hoo. I you know, there's a lot of people who are saying like. And before I say this, I don't agree with LeBron because LeBron said, well, I've won the 2 toughest championships ever in the NBA. And, you know, I would slow that roll down just a little bit because I understand what he's saying. The Golden State one was tremendous, and I think that one is rightfully so going to be put up there with one of the best ever and one of the toughest ever. But specifically the one with this year with the bubble, you know, I think in another 3 or 4 years, people are going to look back at that and not go, oh my God, what a tough thing that was. Because at the end of the day, the bubble was the bubble, right? It was tough for everyone to do. I don't think you're going to get any more extra credit for that. I think that's just more so for the fans. But specifically, when you talk about the plowing through and just going and getting the season done, I think it's all for the sake of being able to say, you know what, we're gonna have an opportunity for a cup this year. So let's just, you know what, we were gonna sell Patrick Kane, we were gonna sell Taves, we were gonna maybe, you know, sell a couple other guys on the team. But you know what, let's see how we do for this year and you know, play. It's a casino game. Let's gamble and see what happens, because there's going to be a lot of teams next, you know, after the 50 games are over, who are going to go, okay, time to completely tear apart. And the Blackhawks might be one of them. I'm really hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping the Blackhawks have a good season this season, maybe can salvage something. But you know, we're one of those teams that's in that category where if things don't go right in this year, then the full teardown comes next year.
Yeah, and you know, one team that I'm actually going to keep my eyes on are the Washington Capitals, because we know that Henrik was let go by, well, not let go, but was bought out by the Rangers. He feels like he still had a couple of years left, so they obviously let Braden Holtby go. He goes to Vancouver. They bring in the King. I'm actually anxious to see how he's going to play in Washington. Will he have that founded youth, knowing that he's going to be the man, he's going to be the starter now, you know, because, you know, in his last year in New York, there were so many questions because Georgiev was playing so great, and then you had Igor Shesterkin waiting in the wings, and the King was struggling. Like, he was giving up soft goals that in his heyday he would never give up, and the Rangers went in a different direction. They bring in Shesterkin. You know, we saw him obviously in Chicago and how great he was in that game against the Blackhawks, and he's kind of maybe one of the main reasons why the Rangers were even considered to be in the tournament to get into the playoffs, was because of Igor. So I'm actually anxious to see how that team, because that team is based off veterans, and you know, obviously they really haven't been the same since Torts left Washington to go coach the Islanders. Yeah. So I'm actually anxious to see how he plays in Washington. You know, is he going to be giving up soft goals, or will he be the King that's aiming for a cup before he can retire? Right. We'll see. But that's a team I also have my eyes on.
All right, cool. Yeah, so about a month to the day almost till we have NHL action to talk about, and then again in another week, next Friday, we will have the NBA kickoff, and again they have a pretty nice slate of games for the Christmas setup, which again we talked about it last week. That was super important to them. You know, we talked about how basketball on Christmas is very much like football on Thanksgiving. You got to have it, got to make sure that it's on, and they make lots and lots of money from that. So I imagine they won't be missing out on too much this year. I want to talk a little UFC before we get into the NFL, because there's always so much NFL, and I just kind of want to sneak in this card that's happening tonight. It's a 256 pay-per-view. How can I be nice about this? There's 10 fights on this card, and maybe 5 of them are really good. And I think the other 5 are duds. Kevin Holland versus Jacare Junior Dos Santos for Cyril Gain. That's going to be a pretty underrated one. My future wife, Mackenzie Dern, is on the card as well. Tony Ferguson versus Charles Oliveira. That's a pretty nice fight. I think everybody's excited for that one. The world flyweight champion Davison Figueiredo will face against Brandon Moreno, which if Figueiredo wins, he's got to be the UFC Fighter of the Year. That would make him 5-0 in 2020, including 2 title, or it would be 3 title defenses now. That's pretty impressive. So, and then there's a couple pretty good ones early on too. Cub Swanson versus Jesus Pineda, Hanato Moicano versus this kid Fiziev, dude. If you watch tonight, you got to keep an eye on this guy Fiziev. He's done some Matrix-like shit, dude. And he's one thing that I would say is he's probably more of a welterweight, but he's fighting at lightweight. So he's got a lot of skills that people aren't ready for. So that should be an interesting fight. But yeah, we talked about how the UFC was trying to put on this sort of like grand show for the end of the year, and put on. They had a pretty nice card set up for the most part when it comes to next week, or it actually would be 2 weeks from now. But they keep losing fights like every week. Like last week's card, 3 fights got canceled an hour before the event started. Like, that is just so, like, to me, if you're an organization and you know that you need at least 8 to 10 fights to make a card good, schedule 13 so that you can make a cushion for that. But last week's card was just kind of you end up watching it and you go, okay, 1, 2. To be fair, there were some really good fights on early in the card, but casual fans, the UFC is losing more and more casual fans as the day goes by because it's harder and harder. I mean, I don't blame people. When you look at this card on paper, nobody's going to be jumping up. No casual fans going, oh my God, Jacare versus Kevin Holland. Like, what? A 40-year-old Jacare versus Kevin Holland. Nobody's going to be, jumping up for this. So the UFC right now is just, I think, hoping to get through the year with everybody intact and move on to next year, because it's been a rough, say what you want. They did a good job of sort of leading the charge of staying open through the Corona stuff. But the lack of quality in fights is really obvious over the last couple of weeks.
So as you were talking, I had just made this comparison in my head. The UFC now, the UFC reminds me a lot of the WWE. Allow me to explain. When we were coming up watching wrestling, I mean, we're talking star-studded power. The Rock, Stone Cold, The Undertaker,
Mankind.
Then you had like the NWO, and you had WCW, you had Sting, Triple H. Like you were at a point when we were coming up in high school where you was always rushing to the TV for Raw, and you were rushing to the TV for SmackDown, and you were begging your parents for the pay-per-view. Them MFers were $65, 70 in HD, and we had no job the first.
Right. Yeah.
We're like, Mom, you gotta get us this pay-per-view.
Yeah.
I want to have friends over. You're wrestling in the basement.
Right. Yeah.
Those were the days.
Yeah.
The UFC is no different.
Right.
Because when we were watching, when the UFC was first, like when I first started watching, Ken Shamrock, Tito, Chuck, Randy Couture, Quentin Rampage Jackson, Tim Sylvia, what's the Andre Arlovsky, GSP, Matt Hughes, Matt Serra, the star power, Anderson Silva,
Brock Lesnar. I mean, you could throw Brock Lesnar in there.
You feel what I'm saying? The star-studded power was there. So when you knew that Tito was going to fight Chuck Liddell and get his ass beat, what were you doing? Either you were trying to find someone to watch the fight, or someone like me had to be a sucker and pull I'm going to go to Buffalo Wild Wings at 5, and I'll squat a seat and you guys just show up around 9. I'll take the L.
Yeah.
Somebody had to circle and take the L.
Yeah.
You just don't have that in either one anymore.
Yeah.
Like the star, like all of our heroes in wrestling are either old or dying. Pat Patterson just died this past week. Hogan's getting old. The Ultimate Warrior, and I still find this weird. This man made a speech damn near almost saying, like, look, live life every day till it's your last. And he died the very next day.
Wow.
Mean Gene Okerlund died. All of our heroes are slowly but surely going. The UFC is kind of in the same boat. Not so much that people are dying, but these guys that we have grown up to watch and enjoy, it's just not there anymore. So now you're trying to, you got John Bones Jones being a bitch, and you got Stipe Miocic, dodging people for the title, and then you got, the light heavyweight ain't really what it was anymore, and then we're still talking if Khabib is going to go up against GSP, but man, GSP is how many years old? And then you get dick stains like freaking Henry Cejudo, who goes out and begs for UFC top-notch money, and then you name 3 guys that either are retired or haven't fought in years, stuff like that, dude. And then when you become one of the best 2-belt champs, you just retire.
For the attention, too.
I'll come back for the right price.
Terrible.
Like
Terrible.
Cejudo can kiss my nuts, dude.
Yeah.
That would have never happened back in the day.
No.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's why when you say that this card right here is so underwhelming, you're right. Because in the heyday of UFC, when it was UFC 100, which was right around this holiday time, you had Brock versus Frank Mir. You had Henderson versus Bisping, I think, was one of those fights. And there was another 3 star-studded main events, co-main events on one card. You just don't have that anymore.
No, yeah.
And that's why that's kind of, I don't know if it's just if the UFC has lost grips on how to promote their guys, or if the level of talent just isn't there.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. You would have think that COVID would have been the nice time to really start bringing your promotion up, so there's reasons for people to want to watch this stuff.
Yeah.
And you don't. So I think your point is spot on when you say, like, look, and that's another thing too, dude. When you knew Tito was fighting Chuck, unless somebody was on their deathbed,
it was going to happen.
Tito was fighting Chuck.
It was happening, right.
Now, dude, you get these fights. This fight canceled, this dude tore his ACL. That fight canceled, this dude hurt his arm. This fight's canceled now because of COVID. Yeah. It's like the UFC comes to between the perennial rock and hard place. It's because they're thinking like, man, this is a great card, but then some BS always comes up in 3 fights, and now what was a 10 to maybe 13 fight star-studded with some star-studded cards. Now you gotta bring up an undercard, put them on the main card, and someone that was on the main card now has to become the main event that never was main event worthy because people are forever getting hurt and going way too hard during gym sessions.
Training, yeah. And
so I'm with you 100%.
It's funny because a prelim to a card, it's got to be at least 3 fights. You got to have 3 fights in the prelim. The UFC has 1 fight in the early prelim. Why not just move that up to the second pre? Like, exactly. It doesn't really make sense. And I do want to touch on a little bit about what you're talking about, because oddly enough, the UFC parted ways with almost 70 fighters over the last week. They had an extremely overinflated roster, with Dana White looking for a fight, plus the Dana White Contender Series, plus being able to get some of these fighters from the Dagestan, where Khabib is from Russia, more international fighters. It's created an extremely overinflated roster. And what happens is the UFC was thinking 2 years ago. The plan was we're going to get our roster up to a certain size so that basically we can put on, if we wanted to, 2 fights a week every single week for the whole year. And on paper, that looks really good. And you're like, oh my God, that's going to be cool. It's going to be like we get to see two main event cards every single week. That's awesome. But it's a pipe dream in the grand scheme of things because that's the fighting game. Like, first of all, not everybody's fighting 5 times a year. So you have over 100 people on the UFC roster who have only fought 1 time or less this year. That means you're paying these people to not do their job. So guys like Yoel Romero, guys like Anderson Silva, and Rachel Ostovich, who's a big fan favorite because she's really hot, they just let them go. And the Bellator is not clamoring to go get Anderson Silva. Bellator is not like, we need Yoel Romero. I think the fight game has moved on from some of these guys sooner than the UFC has. So like I said, 60-plus fighters, and a lot of those fighters, by the way, were basically told, hey, I wouldn't expect to get a call back from us anytime soon. So, it seems like the UFC is trying to take a little bit of a different approach. By the way, I don't know if you saw this, but there was a landmark winning in court. A bunch of UFC fighters had a class action lawsuit against the UFC, and the UFC has spent the last 2 years trying to, pay lawyers to get that thrown out, and it did not work. So these UFC fighters actually won, and it's basically step 1 in getting a fighters union, which would be really, really bad for the UFC. I'm just... Not because it's bad, not because unions are bad. It's because Dana White is a fucking savage and he does not care about any of these people that he employs. He will gladly throw all of these people under the bus, make them unemployed if it means that he has to lose money out of his pocket, if the UFC has to lose money out of their pocket. And that's a really sad thing because when you hear that guys are making $35,000 for 6 months of work, it's not really that great. It's like you're thinking at the end of the day, you're getting to do $35,000 is a lot for one night. Well, you're preparing for 6 months. You're paying a trainer. You're paying a physician or a dietitian. There's expenses. Like, you're not going to be able to be a millionaire just by having 3 or 4 fights in the UFC, and that's kind of a problem because what happens is I think the share right now is around 50. I think the share's around 50%. I think 50% of the revenue goes to the fighters. The other 50% goes to the UFC. The problem with the 50% going to the fighters is you're splitting that among 600 fighters. So at the end of the day, that comes down to almost nothing. So it's going to be really interesting to see. We may see some news here over the next couple of weeks about it, but it's going to be interesting to see where they go from here because, one of the reasons why they said they're going to cut upwards of 60 fighters by the end of the year is I think because they are anticipating that union is coming pretty soon.
Yeah, and it's funny, and again, it's funny you mention that because I think the WWE is going through the same thing where there's going to be a wrestlers union. And remember, it was former governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura. Jesse the Body Ventura has been has pretty much for decades, not years. If I said for years, it would not do justice. For decades, has wanted to go head to head against Vince McMahon, saying, "Why hasn't anyone ever started a wrestling union?" Because you get these guys who see people think they slick is basically what it is, where you get these guys that they're going to claim and say, well, I'm an independent contractor. That's what Vince McMahon tried to make the wrestlers see.
That's what Dana did too.
That these guys are independent contractors. So if you need to go get insurance, you got to get it on your own. If you want to go get this, that, and everything else, you got to get it on your own. Vince McMahon is worth billions of dollars, and you're going to tell me you can't cough off a couple of million to make sure that your guys are straight? Like, come on, man. And that's what Jesse Ventura was saying, because he was saying, you get these guys are wrestling for $300,000 300 days a year.
Wow, that's crazy.
They're basically forfeiting their families. They can only hang with their families for basically 2 months out of the year.
God.
But you're not giving these guys any type of decent benefits package to make sure that they're going to be straight. Like, that doesn't make sense. So I think Dana White and Vince McMahon need to kind of become best friends coming up here, because I see a fighters union and I see a wrestlers union coming up really quick.
Yeah, they'll be sharing lawyers pretty soon. So
I believe that.
Yeah, and it looks like, again, the UFC is going to still have that fight going on in the next couple of weeks or that card, rather, that's got lots and lots of fights and da-da-da. But honestly, dude, at this point, I'm gonna check the Thursday before the event, see who weighs in, see who makes it, and then we'll start to talk about it. Because right now, it seems crazy to start to talk about some of these fights, and we don't even know what the hell is going to happen over the next couple of weeks. So, and again, the UFC is in a precarious position here because they don't exactly hold a lot of leverage in this whole thing. Without fighters, you don't have a league. So, not exactly sure what the huge thing is. And, in terms of like business people, that's fine. Like, I'm not mad at Dana White. I'm not mad at Vince McMahon for wanting to run a productive business. But to say that there's no money to give your fighters or your wrestlers insurance, to say there's no money to have a collective bargaining, it's just lying. It's just straight up lying. And that's what bothers me most, is that Dana White has tried to convince people for years that the fighters are greedy, that the UFC pays people more than anybody else does, and da-da-da. And it's funny, like Paige Van Zandt, she got released earlier this year, and she said she made more in one fight at bare knuckle boxing than she would have in her last 3 fights in the UFC. Imagine somebody coming and saying, the NBL, the National Basketball League, a third tier league, pays more to its basketball players than the NBA. Like, how is that even possible? Bare knuckle boxing is not even in the top 5 as far as I'm concerned, and they're paying her more. I just don't understand that, quite frankly.
And dude, let me ask you this question too, because I'm actually just thinking about this. You mentioned boxing, and it kind of just got my mind going. But dude, how is it just me, or do I feel like ESPN has not really done a great job promoting such UFC fights? Think about it like this. What was the boxing match that just happened last week? Spence Jr. versus whoever.
Yeah. I just found out about it the night of.
Between Facebook, Fox Sports, and maybe another sports outlet, I can't think of who it was. Mm-hmm. I knew that fight was happening. Mm. When the UFC was with FS1, was with Fox Sports, you knew when these fights were happening.
Plastered all over the commercials, and
all over the commercials, bro. So, like, if you had, I'm just throwing 2 names out, but let's say if Junior Dos Santos was going out to fight Minotauro Nogueira, right? Just throwing 2 names out.
Sure.
It was plastered all over between Undisputed, The Herd, Premier, whatever, that this fight was going to happen and everyone was going to watch. Now that it's on ESPN, if you're not really watching ESPN, you don't really know about it. As a matter of fact, I'll do you one better. Facebook doesn't really do justice on UFC cards. Not like it was doing when UFC was with FS1. So, I know ESPN might be the bigger sports company, but maybe they should have reconsidered wanting to go over there and just stick with FS. Yeah. Because I feel like the promotion game, I feel like Fox would have done a better job promoting this card, even though it's it's kind of a weaker card than what ESPN is doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and let's be honest. The the UFC went to ESPN because they came with that Disney money. That's the absolute only reason why the UFC chose that, because they knew that, listen, FS1 needed the UFC. That was really, FS1 needed the UFC so badly that when UFC left, they expanded their boxing operations because they knew there was a huge hole in their coverage. And that's why a lot of these boxing matches, like you mentioned, are so well hyped on Fox, because it's focused and hyper-focused on it. But ESPN, dude, I mean, we know how it is with hockey on ESPN. You can barely, you are lucky if you see a hockey highlight in the first 45 minutes of SportsCenter. And whether or not we want to believe it, that has a lot to do with the bias of our sports fans, of it's basketball, football, and baseball, and everything else comes after that. And the UFC isn't even like fifth on that list as far as I'm concerned, because college basketball and college football, and then you've got, even more of the boxing stuff to deal with, because ESPN is still in the boxing business. They still, they make a lot of money off of boxing. So, yeah, you're right. I think right now, it was a little bit of an oversight on their part. I think they thought that being affiliated with ESPN was going to raise them up, and in turn, it turned out that ESPN, all it really did was give access to people that maybe didn't have access before, because honestly, FS1 is really frustrating for me. I don't know why it's so hard sometimes to find FS1. Like, for example, if baseball was playing and there was a UFC card, then they moved the UFC fight to FS2, but nobody knew what the hell FS2 was. And as far as I'm concerned, I think it was only online only or something like that. So I think that really frustrated them. They didn't have they wanted Fox to commit to more of the Fox shows, so being on the network Fox, and I honestly think Fox is still a little bit behind on that, because they still see the UFC as a barbaric sport of these, guys elbowing and bloody heads and this and this and that. So at the end of the day, that was a business decision, and you're right. It's not like the UFC has grown much since going to ESPN. That was the whole selling point, right? Was that we're going to grow this sport, and people, we're going to have more casual fans. And what I saw was you force more people to buy ESPN Plus, because that wasn't a part of the deal when you first started with them. When you first started with them, it was, we're keeping UFC Fight Pass, but we're going to have everything else, all the free cards on ESPN. And then 2 or 3 weeks after the acquisition, they said, oh, by the way, the only way you can watch us otherwise is ESPN Plus. And, oh, yeah, if you want to buy pay-per-view, you can't do it through Comcast anymore. You have to go through ESPN Plus. These are little things that make a big difference, and at the end of the day, it really killed the UFC. So, understandable. All right, let's talk some football, man. I don't want to.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to jump too far without talking about football, but Thursday night football, Patriots. It's not working out too well for them, man.
And the crazy part is, dude, you just pitched a whole shutout on the road against maybe one of the hotter young quarterbacks in the game in Justin Herbert, and you turn around and look like complete utter crap against the Rams. Now, granted, the Rams defense is stiff.
For real.
Extra stiff. And, the Rams have turned out to be one of those teams where if you're not winning by halftime, there's a great chance you're not winning that football.
Yeah.
I think what are they? 50-something and 0 under McVay when they have a lead going into halftime.
Yeah,
some
that's tremendous. Yeah,
stat.
That's crazy.
And that's how. And the funny part is, and we mentioned this last week. We mentioned on how Leonard Floyd went from being just a linebacker to now all of a sudden being able to get to the quarterback now. And, we talk about, the resurgence of Michael Brockers and how good he's been, and Jalen Ramsey and how his presence has done in the secondary.
Kenny Young, the linebacker, Kenny Young had a pick six. Yeah.
Yep. And Cam Akers ran for 171 yards last week. So, the thing that – and they were playing so bad they took Cam out and brought in that Jacob Steedman, whatever his
Right.
name is.
Yeah.
Unless you were bringing in Jesus, they weren't going to win that game. But man,
Yeah.
just Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, 45-0. You beat the Chargers last week, and then this week you look like total ass against the Rams. So yeah, not a good showing by the New England Patriots this week.
Yeah, and honestly, the Rams, I did a little bit of reanalyzing on them. I mean, if you think about it, their defense has kept them in every single game this year, no matter how incompetent their offense was. Remember that Dolphins game that they lost? That was like because of 2 defensive touchdowns and like 4 turnovers by the offense. So it's crazy to think about that. A Sean McVay-led team has an elite defense, and their real one Achilles heel is being able to get it done on offense. But what a really nice example of what, in effect, a defense has like that. Because when you look at it, the Patriots are not a bad team by any stretch of the imagination. They still have good pieces all over the team. Still have pretty nice offensive linemen. You can make an argument that their skill position players are really low right now, and I think that's the one thing that's killed them is they're so used to being able to plug in anybody off the street and having Tom Brady throw them touchdowns that now when you go back into it and you've got N'Keal Harry and Jacoby Myers and Jameer Byrd, these guys are not guys that should be at the premier level of your offense. And then the defense, for the Patriots are doing all they can at this point, quite frankly, because the offense can't get it done. Constantly turning it over, constantly getting stopped on 4th down or at the goal line. Like, I've never seen a team struggle as badly at getting the ball in the first 3 tries than the Patriots have this year. And we saw it, they lost the game as a result against the Seahawks because of that too. So 24-3 was the score. Jared Goff, we mentioned, he wasn't even that great. It was really Cam Akers was going all over the place, and they did a good job on defense of just making sure that there was going to be, and obviously that pick 6 by Kenny Young, which was really a turning point in the game. By that point, it was 10-0, and the Patriots were like, okay, let's get back in this game. You throw a pick 6, and now it's 17-0. So an interesting one here, and it seems like, I don't know, I haven't looked at the standings, to really make an analyzation, but at 6-7, I don't see a way that the Patriots have a path into the playoffs at this point.
Nah, and the AFC is just so strong right now. The AFC is so strong. Yeah, 6-7 is kind of putting them behind the 8 ball.
And it'll be the first time, I want to say it was 10 years, that the Patriots won't have 10 wins. As a Tampa Bay Bucks fan, you can start to be petty if you'd like to. We'll give you permission to be petty and start to talk to all of your Patriots friends about, like, how did that whole thing work out? Was it Brady or was it Belichick? Because again, we just mentioned it. If you look at the position players that Tom Brady was used to dealing with, it's very similar to the caliber that they have on right now. And by the way, the backfield's the exact same as it was last year, pretty much, other than Sony Michel getting hurt for most of the season. So Tom Brady was able to do a lot with that, and this team, not so much.
And, it's kind of crazy because it's not like Cam Newton during his tenure in Carolina had any major barn burners for wide receivers. Maybe he had Steve Smith for a few years. Yeah. But Steve Smith was kind of on the back end of his career. I mean, he was still effective. Yeah. But
DJ Moore, DJ Moore's a really nice receiver, but is he like a bona fide number 1? I don't know. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that's why I'm thinking, I don't understand the struggle with him in New England, because at the end of the day, you almost kind of have the same skill set receivers in New England that you've had for so long when you were in Carolina, and it's a struggle. So here's a couple things that I can say. Either A, Cam is just is more hurt than maybe that we're led on to believe. Mm-hmm. Or maybe B, Cam Newton hasn't really been Cam Newton. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, when the year that he won MVP which I think went around the same year that they went to the Super Bowl. When they lost to Denver, dude, Cam was acting a fool the entire time he was out there.
True.
He's doing the Superman poses.
Having
he's posing.
fun.
He's in the other defense's heads. They're getting pissed off that he's acting a fool. He's basically saying, "Stop me, or I'm gonna keep acting more stupid." And somehow that team went. I think it was either 12-4, 13-3, or some stupid. It went all the way to the Super Bowl to lose to Denver.
Yeah.
He hasn't been that quarterback since.
No.
Maybe because people are like, "Hey, man, you can't be up there acting like that."
Sure.
Or, you can't be this and that. So it's the same thing that I said about Lamar Jackson as far as his play comparing to Donovan McNabb.
Yeah.
Donovan McNabb had most of his successes when he was a dual threat quarterback. But for some reason, no one wanted to respect his quarterback genius because he was such a running quarterback. And then he became a pocket passer and he was a shell of himself. It almost goes back to, and this is why ESPN pisses me off, and I'm not so much of a fan per se when I watch them in the morning, was because, do you remember when ESPN, we have to go back many moons, almost damn near to 2002 when the Bucks won the Super Bowl, because it's when it happened. But that's when ESPN thought that it was okay to put in like Rush Limbaugh in the NFL
coverage,
the pregame show and whatnot.
Yeah.
And do you remember what got him in trouble? Was when he said that in refers to Donovan McNabb, he goes, well, the reason why everyone's giving Donovan McNabb all this credit was because the media was desirous for a black quarterback to succeed. And everyone's like, oh, it's not that. It's blah, 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 blah. And in the midst of guys like Tom Jackson and some of these other goofs that were up there, he said because the defense deserved a lot more credit than what they were giving to Donovan McNabb. And he was right. Because if you can go in the way back machine just a little bit, remember that playoff game they had against Atlanta? They had 2 touchdown scoring drives. The first drive and the last one. So who do you think kept Michael Vick intact for them to even be in that game?
Right.
It was the defense.
Yep.
Rush Limbaugh was correct.
Yeah.
The only thing was everyone heard black and everyone just flipped out like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
How can you say black? Did you not hear the whole point?
Sure.
And so, and that's kind of where I feel with Lamar and I feel with Cam, where for some reason they're not the model quarterbacks. They're not, the Brett Favre's per se, even though Brett Favre had wheels. The Brett Favre's per se. And even though Aaron Rodgers has wheels, the Aaron Rodgers per se. And the Peyton Mannings per se. And the Tom Brady's per se. No offense, but I mean, John Elway had wheels, and I didn't see nobody tweaking about him being a dual threat.
Yeah.
Steve Young had wheels, and I didn't see nobody tripping about him being a dual threat. But Lamar becomes a dual threat, people got a problem. Cam Newton's acting a fool, people having problems. So I just think Cam Newton is not really being Cam Newton. Yeah. I think he's trying to be corporate Cam Newton, and it's not working. He needs to be, let me act a fool Cam Newton.
Right.
And I almost would guarantee you will get better results.
See, I think the issue was that when Cam got let go from Carolina, he sort of put on this new face of like, I'm going to prove everyone wrong and da-da-da-da-da. And then once he got to New England, let's be honest, everybody was like, this is a match made in heaven. The Patriots couldn't have done a better job. Who could have they gotten better than Cam? And really, I think Cam came in with the aspect of like, okay, I can tighten up my tie a little bit and be a little bit more professional. But I think it was a desperation on both parties because Cam, first of all, he refused to go in and try and fight for a job anywhere. And you know what? That's his prerogative. He's allowed to do that. But also, remember, the Patriots were very, very stubborn when it came to their quarterback situation. When Tom left, they were like, we might as well just have Jarrett Stidham. He's been here for a while, so you know what? Our system makes quarterbacks. Quarterbacks don't make our system. How's that working out for you? Because it doesn't seem to be working out too well. And also, I do want to mention, one thing that I've always pondered on is that guys like Lamar Jackson, guys like Cam, guys like, even to a certain extent Deshaun Watson, who we'll talk about in a second, these guys have some really, really nice, naturally gifted qualities, including very strong arms, the ability to sort of, torque that arm and get the ball to where it needs to be. But that doesn't lend itself to fundamentals all the time, too. And that means your footwork is typically bad. One thing I've noticed about Lamar Jackson, his footwork has been absolutely horrible this year. When he sees he's seeing ghosts every play, but when he sees any sort of semblance of pressure, he throws all of his throwing mechanics out the window, and he's just trying to make Patrick Mahomes plays. I want people to understand, Patrick Mahomes is special for a reason. He's the only guy who can do the jump throw. He's the only guy who can make those throws off the back foot. He's the only guy who can make left-handed throws when he wants to. That's because he's special. That's because he's got that ability. That's because he's able to make that happen. And what happens is you get guys like Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson and some of these other guys, and even Cam to a certain extent, where you're like, you're losing your fundamentals, and 99% of the mistakes that you're making are as a result of that. And right. You have to take a look at, and I want to get into the first game, because it has to do with my Bears. They'll be hosting the Texans, and Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Watson's like crying on the sidelines. I feel bad for him. It's a tough situation for him to deal with in Houston, and they basically give Bill O'Brien the keys and say, we're going to let you drive this organization to wherever you want the next 3 years. And then, like, right when they're at the pinnacle of what he thought was going to be the team, they fire him 3 games in or 4 games in, and he didn't have the opportunity to even really understand what the hell they were supposed to be doing. And I feel bad for a guy like Deshaun, but, Deshaun's another guy who, he has a big problem with turnovers, dude. Like, I know it hasn't been much in the interception department this year, but fumbling the ball, not making good throws on third down, not being able to he likes to scramble, but he takes a lot of hits. I mean, he's taken some hits over the last couple of years that most guys won't get up from. So, the mentality has to be, when you get a quarterback like that who's as special as that, you have to keep them grounded. And that's like the one thing that I think Kansas City does really well with Pat Mahomes is, like, keep him grounded. Let him make the left-handed passes, but also hold him to task when he's not making the fundamental throws or not doing the fundamental things. By the way, we've seen those examples, right? We've seen Patrick Mahomes have like 2 or 3 bad quarters, but then he just makes the adjustment, makes the throw, does what he has to do. The team doesn't always win the game, but he never ends up having bad games. He has bad quarters, right. He has bad series, maybe bad drives, but he's never had bad games because he's always able to make those adjustments. And one thing you didn't see at all on Thursday night, the Patriots made no adjustments, and Cam made no adjustments. I still think his throwing motion is a little bit too friendly for defenders. When you've got it over the top and just kind of fling the ball, you don't make touch passes as well as you need to, and he's really bad at touch passes. So you saw it against the Rams. They have a number 1 shutdown corner, and if you don't have a number 1 wide receiver, they are going to completely shut you down on one side of the field. So it's interesting to see where they go from here, especially Cam.
Yeah, if there's not a team that could really go for the reset button, the Houston Texans are it.
Yeah.
I was doing a DoorDash the other day, and I was wearing my Buccaneer shirt, and the guy was kind of teasing me a little bit because he was a Houston Texans fan, and we were kind of shooting the breeze a little bit. And I think one thing he said that really stuck out. Well, I think we kind of both had said it, but the Houston Texans have not really been. This team hasn't really been the same over the years, in the sense of, like, if you look on the defensive side of the ball, really the only guy left on that defensive side of the ball is J.J. Watt. Mm-hmm. But you're starting to see that even he isn't as effective as he used to be. But that's because Houston doesn't have the stars that they once used to. Mm-hmm. Here's a team that once had J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney and Brian Cushing and Whitney Merciless, all in the same front seven.
Mm-hmm.
And it made, it was like, okay, we're going to have to focus on Jadeveon because he's a monster. Oh, damn, we forgot about J.J. Watt, so now he's in on the sack. And then Whitney Merciless is taking up two guys in the middle. So, okay, so Watt's going to come in free. And then, Brian Cushing is still making tackles, but, he got in a point where he couldn't stay healthy. And, Bill O'Brien just made a few, when you trade your best wide receiver, but you don't even get a first-round draft pick out of it. All you did was trade for a running back who obviously isn't the same running back that he once was many years ago, in David Johnson. Then, there's going to be that point where it feels like Deshaun Watson's trying to do so much now that he feels like he has so little, and it's putting him behind the 8 ball. So, I think Houston's that team where I'm not saying they need to trade Deshaun Watson, but they're going to have to hit the reset button at some point. But you can't even do it this year because your first-round draft pick belongs to the Miami Dolphins, who right now are in the playoff picture.
Right.
So you can't even be like, okay, this is a lost season. Let's get us the best guy that we might be able to get maybe between 4 and 10, and we can rebuild from that because now that's Miami's pick. So Bill O'Brien left them in a bad spot, but they're just not playing well as a team.
Yeah, I want to take you in the Wayback Machine too, but and this is going to tie into both the Bears and the Texans, but Vince Wilfork, when he was in the Texans uniform, he ate so much space for both Clowney and Watt that was really a huge cog. And DJ Reader, he's been their guy the last couple of years. They let him walk in free agency. He went to Cincinnati and had a really nice season in Cincinnati until he got hurt. And I'll mention another one for the Bears. I mean, people like to talk about Akeem Hicks, and Akeem Hicks is one of the biggest pieces of this defense. But Eddie Goldman, not having a 325-pound guy in the middle to eat 2 or 3 blockers makes a huge difference, and you're seeing the difference because he opted out of the season. I'm not exactly sure what his reasoning was behind it, but he opted out of the season, and the Bears have been left high and dry. You had to move Bilal Nichols into a nose tackle. He's not a nose tackle. He's more of a 3-4 right end, a power rusher. So, at the end of the day, I think there's a trend between both of these teams, which is that both the Bears and the Texans have made some serious miscalculations over the last 2 or 3 years, both in free agency and the trade market and in the draft. Both of these teams have had bad drafts over the last couple of years. The Bears maybe have 1 or 2 players to show for that, but otherwise bad. Same thing with Houston. I think they maybe have 1 safety, Justin Reed, to show for their draft. Otherwise, have not drafted well themselves. So that takes us into the matchup after the Bears embarrassed themselves. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. Let's talk about our picks from last week. I know it wasn't pretty, but give me an idea.
All right. It may not have been pretty you per se,
but you look good.
But I snapped.
Okay.
Oh yeah, dude. Okay, so you went 9-6 heads up and 7-8 against the spread, and I went 11-4 in both my picks and against the spread. And the one game that's going to still piss me off is I knew I should have picked the Giants. I knew it was.
Yeah.
I was in line to say the Giants. I'm taking the Giants until you told me that Daniel Jones was out of the game. Yep. And I was like, damn, I should still pick the Giants, but man, I don't know. I'm not feeling it. And the Seattle Seahawks proved exactly what I've been talking about all year. This team is garbage. You can't tell me nothing. This is the most overrated team in the game, and I'm still not on the Russell Wilson for MVP talk like everybody else is, because it's so funny that everyone's like, hey, Nick, how's Tom Brady looking at MVP right now? How's Russell Wilson looking for MVP right now? Against the New York Giants at home, you dropped 12 points? Yeah, real MVP-like performance. Dingus. Pure dinguses. And I'm telling you, dude, I immediately texted you as soon as they won the game, and I said, God damn it, I knew I should have picked the Giants.
That would have been a nearly perfect week.
I swear to God, it's the only game that pissed me off this past week.
Yeah.
Because I knew in my heart of hearts that the Giants were going to beat Seattle.
Yeah.
I just knew it because I think Seattle was a joke. And I will say that till the cows come home. Their defense is atrocious.
Yep.
And like you said, dude, Russell Wilson over the last 5 years has been running for his life. So what did the Seattle Seahawks do? Hey, man, we're going to trade for Jimmy Graham, and we gave him one of our best offensive linemen for it, Max Unger. We're going to trade Max Unger for Jimmy Graham so we can help out on the red zone. But, oh, yeah, I forgot. Maybe the guy that we replaced him with can't block that well. So the minute you hire the ball, you're just going to have to run. There's no such thing as set pocket throws.
Yeah.
Give me a flipping break. Dude, you want to talk about a guy that's pretty much still has a job based on reputation of Pete Carroll? Yeah, let's that dude.
Yeah.
Because they went out and sold the farm for Jamal Adams, and their defense is still awful.
I don't know what they were thinking. I have no clue what they were thinking with that trade, because they must have thought that their front four was going to be good enough to, rush the passer. But they are God. I mean, listen, if you can't stop Colt McCoy, you're in big trouble. I mean, that no Saquon, no, their best receiver is out. Their quarterback is out, and I will give credit, that New York defense is really good. They've whatever they've done to build that. I think a lot of people were giving them crap for the Dexter Lawrence pick. A lot of them were talking about, you traded for Leonard Williams to get the Jets garbage. Leonard Williams has looked tremendous. Dexter Lawrence has looked tremendous. Blake Martinez has looked tremendous. They got a couple of steals in the secondary too. So yeah, we'll talk about them. That looked amazing. But one thing I do want to mention before I move on too. One of the huge raging sort of debates that's always in one of my group chats with my fantasy football buddies is like the importance of the offensive line, right? Because we talked about like Aaron Rodgers constantly has 2 All-Pros on his offensive line over the last 10 years. If you look at it, right, he's always had at least minimum 2 really, really good offensive linemen, and including always 1 left tackle. It always was like he's got a great left tackle, his blind side is set, and one thing that's been constant with Seattle, and they tried to do that with the Dwayne Brown thing, which hasn't really worked out for them in that right as well, is that they've never had an offensive line for this guy. And, Pete Carroll, too, like, it's funny you mention him. We don't hear enough about how Pete Carroll has sort of dove this team over the last couple of years. I mean, we still don't mention as much as we should the game against the Super Bowl against the Patriots, where he should have just ran the damn ball with Marshawn Lynch, would have won them another Super Bowl. But then on top of that, his play calling, I know he doesn't do play calling, but the play calling for Seattle, terrible. Yeah. I mean, I don't care how good the Giants' defense is. There's absolutely no excuse for the game even being that close, let alone losing the game there. So I think we can get into that a little bit more once we jump in. But I just want to talk about that Bears game last week, because what an absolute disaster that was. Put yourself in a position to win the game. The defense is constantly playing soft. The play calling is absolutely terrible again. They look unprepared again. By the way, the Lions were shorthanded, didn't have their best running back, didn't have their best wide receiver. Their best tight end was hurt. Matt Stafford is hurt. Their defense is constantly hurt. And all the Bears do, they find ways to lose games. You know how the people say, like, find ways to win games. We find ways to lose games. All you have to do is protect the ball in that situation. It's in the fourth quarter. You're inside your own 20. You got your backs against the end zone, and you fumble the ball, give it to them easily, and they score the touchdown and win the game. And quite frankly, the Bears fans that I've talked to, the smart Bears fans, were not super bummed about that. That was kind of like one of those where, like, we're gonna win. Oh my God, we're gonna have a shittier draft pick. We're still not gonna make the playoffs. But we're gonna win this game, and they kind of did us a favor. And now, if after that nobody's head is on the chopping block to get fired, I don't know what else can happen.
Yeah, you're right about that. And first off, real quick, before we get knees deep, Stan Rocket, who's a diehard White Sox fan. Let me say that again. White Sox fan.
We didn't even talk about
the Sox. Any news about your boys?
Yeah. So, as far as the White Sox are concerned, they went ahead and made a couple of moves over the last week or so.
Oh, that's right. They did trade for Lance Lynn.
They traded for Lance Lynn, and then signed Adam Eaton. So here's my thing on both of those. Okay, Lance Lynn is one of the best pitchers in baseball over the last 2 years. He's a little bit older. I think a lot of people were more upset with who they traded. They traded Dane Dunning, who was one of the pieces that came back in the Adam Eaton trade that brought back Giolito and Ronaldo Lopez. He was the third guy in that. He had a really nice season for the White Sox last year, and a lot of guys. He was a fan favorite because a lot of guys really liked him. They traded him him and another left-handed pitching prospect for Lance Lynn. I think both teams, it's possible, Nick, for both teams to win a trade. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is possible. Oh, yeah. It's possible for the White Sox to give up a young, promising pitcher who has control over the next 6 years, and still win a trade, and I think they did that here. Lance Lynn is a tremendous number 3 pitcher. I think he's going to give you exactly what you need out of a veteran pitcher. Innings eater, too. Consistently eating innings, and that's something that we've had a problem with over the last couple of years. I still think they need another pitcher. I would say another starting pitcher, and I really think they should be going after Liam Hendricks, who's a closer from Oakland, who's had a really nice last couple seasons. But the Adam Eaton thing, I think the fan base is pretty much split on this. I don't know if you remember. I'm going to take us back in the Wayback Machine again. Do you remember the whole Adam LaRoche thing with the White Sox?
Oh, with the
his son in the club, right? So that was sort of the beginning of the end for the White Sox, right? The beginning of the end. What that started that rebuild was that Chris Sale, Adam Eaton, and Adam LaRoche were absolutely cancers in the locker room in that year. One of the reasons was because of Drake LaRoche, Adam's son, who was constantly in the locker room. People didn't like that. He was in meetings at some points. He was out in batting practice at some points. And Adam Eaton was one of the guys who came out and said, I don't know what the big deal is. We love Drake around here. And other players looking at him like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? This dude's 12 years old. He's not supposed to be here, you know? So Adam Eaton was not exactly a guy that made a good reputation for himself while he was here, but I don't think he's a locker room cancer that you bring in is going to like ruin your team. No, what he is he's a left-handed batter who we don't need power. The White Sox don't need power anymore. We've got plenty of power as it is. We need really nice, good contact hitters who can hit from the left side and who can play good right field, and that's exactly what Adam Eaton does. So he's relatively cheap for a guy who's been in the league for as long as he has. So you got $8 million for a year with another year of an option. So it's not a 4-year deal. So White Sox fans shouldn't be that mad about it. But I think White Sox fans are a little bit timid right now. They're waiting to see what the next steps happen. I think a Liam Hendricks would make a lot of sense. Another starting pitcher, like maybe even a guy in the mold of like James Paxton or somebody who is leaving a good team because he wasn't good enough to be the second or third starter. Come be the 5th starter here, and we'll be just fine with that. So yeah, the White Sox are making moves, Stan, but I think it's a little bit early in the game. But for the second offseason in a row, Nick, the White Sox start this offseason off right away. Last year it was within the first 3 days of free agency. It was oh my God, I'm blanking on his name right now. Our catcher, Yasmani Grandal. Yeah, I'm sorry. And this year, it's the Lance Lynn trade in Adam Eaton. So let's hope, Stan, that we get another starting pitcher, and Liam Hendricks would be a really nice cap to a nice offseason. Adam Eaton will more than likely platoon with Adam Engel in right field. Luis Roberts, your everyday center fielder. Eloy Jimenez, your everyday left fielder. And then you've got your infield already set with Jose Abreu, Yohan Moncada at third base, Tim Anderson at short, and you've got Nick Madrigal at second. James McCann no longer on the team, so Grandal, and it'll be Zach Collins who will be up there. And Andrew Vaughn, another first-round pick, will more than likely take over Edwin Encarnacion's spots at DH. So lots and lots happening for the White Sox, but still early in the offseason. I want to see where Liam Hendricks goes. I want to see where a couple of these starting pitchers go because the White Sox could still use that help right now.
Hell right.
All righty. All right. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks for checking in, man. Sorry, I was going to try and get to that earlier, but we just, lately, man, we just got so much to talk about. We've got to get through all of it, All right, cool. But let's get back to that game on Sunday here. I don't want to make it too long, but again, embarrassing loss for the Bears, and another loss like that I think will do the trick, so to speak, and get some people out. I don't know. I don't think Matt Nagy's going to get fired. I just have a feeling right now that they are going to scapegoat Ryan Pace. They're going to make Ryan Pace the scapegoat. They're going to fire him, bring in a new GM, and make sure that the GM is okay with Matt Nagy. That's, a lot of the people that I talk to about this are saying, well, why would you hire a GM when he doesn't have his choice of a coach? To me, those things are unrelated to each other. Like, we already have a coach. Do you want to come and be our GM? Because we have a coach right now. If you don't like him, that's fine, but you're not going to be, you're not going to be a good fit. And I think that's where the Bears are going to do. I don't think it's the right decision. I think they should probably fire everybody. But I think short of losing the next, 4 games, it's going to be really, really tough to get rid of Matt Nagy in this season. So I see this one as, I'm going to pick the Texans because I know the Bears are going to win. I swear to God. I'm going to pick the Texans because I know that the Bears are going to find a way to win this game because Houston's defense is not very good and our defense is still pretty good and got back Akeem Hicks now, which is really helping us out. I know Buster Screen's out for this one. Houston is a 2-point favorite on the road. Goes to show that Vegas is just completely over Chicago right now. So I'm going to go ahead and take Houston. But again, in my heart of hearts, I'm taking Houston knowing that I'm going to be wrong about this and the Bears are going to win. Because the thing is, the Bears, they have too much pride on defense to go out like this. And I think the offense right now, they're facing really – I talked about it on last week's show. The next 4 defenses that you're getting, the Texans, the Vikings, the Jaguars, and the Packers. So the Texans and the Jaguars both bottom 10. The Vikings have done better over the last 5 weeks, but they're not one to do very well. They gave up a ton of points to Jacksonville just a couple of weeks ago. And then the Packers too. Listen, if you want to name one Achilles heel of the Packers, it's that the defense hasn't been able to step up and do their job because Aaron Rodgers has been doing nothing but slinging the ball. So that's really the tough issue right now is that the Bears are going to be facing some below competition here coming up, and that may give them some wins that they don't deserve.
Yeah, if you're going to go down, we're going to go down together. So I'm taking the Texans -2 as well.
Coming with me.
but you nailed it on the head, dude. And I know Jacksonville's a bottom 10, but they've played much better over the last couple of weeks with Mike Glennon as quarterback. So, they've definitely been in games over the last couple of weeks. So I think not only are they going against bottom 10 defenses, but in the same breath, sometimes teams that have nothing to play for play the hardest.
True.
And Jacksonville's been kind of that team. And I know we'll get to Tampa in a minute, but I would try to almost borderline sleep on Minnesota because this is the same team that needed overtime to beat said Jacksonville and just lost to a hapless Dallas team the week before.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not buying that nonsense for 1 second. So, you're right. Some of these games should be winnable, but you would have thought that last week's game, what did they say? The Bears had a 99.1% chance to win a game.
It was I think it was 4.5 minutes left, and they had 98. I think it was 99. You're right, 99% chance. That means that basically they had to do the one scenario that would lose them the game, and they did that.
And they figured it out.
So, hey, you know what? You find a way.
What I meant to say earlier is, and I'm with you. I don't like to wish ill will, let alone death, on anybody.
No, yeah.
But remember how Bill Wirtz was running Blackhawks into the ground?
Yep.
Wouldn't show home games on TV because he had this genius notion that Blackhawk fans would not come to games if you showed the games on TV, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. But that's what Bill Wirtz was believing, right?
Yeah.
He was running the Blackhawks into the ground. and then he passed, and then Rocky took over, and all the Blackhawks have done since then was got rid of that rule, did some great drafting, a few signings in there, and they won 3 cups in 6 years.
Yep.
I'm not saying I wish ill will death on Virginia McCaskey, but either she needs to learn that she does have a football team that she's still running, because not only are people calling for Nagy's head, not only are people calling for Pace's head, but people are also calling for Ted Phillips.
Oh, yeah.
And the only one that can get Ted Phillips out is Virginia McCaskey.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a crazy thing. I think when her time has come, I think there's going to be a lot of feet that are going to be put down on people's necks. Like, look, man, you've been you had your security blanket. She's no longer here.
Yeah.
Guess who else is no longer here? Your ass.
Yep.
And start cleaning the house, because, Ted Phillips has been around for the longest, and what does he only have to show? A 2006 or 2008 Super Bowl appearance? That's it.
Yeah, and the funny part is
like this too, dude. The Bears and the Lions find themselves in the same position because the Lions are the same team that fired a 9-7 Jim Caldwell.
Yep.
The Bears fired a 10-6 Lovie Smith, and both teams haven't figured out.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The Bears had the 1 year on the double doink, so that's about it.
No, but the reason why I didn't even mention Ted Phillips' name, he's thinking about retiring. Like, he is understanding that, like, dude, I'm public enemy number 1 right now. And then George McCaskey came out and was like, well, we understand. And the problem is, dude, Bears fans have this attachment to the Hallis family. And listen, I get it. Tradition is really important, and history is really important. But is it really necessary for us to bring our franchise down in the name of keeping the Hallises in the business? I'm sorry, dude. Like, Virginia McCaskey's not a bad lady from what I understand. The problem is she is old as shit and does not understand what is going on around her. And George, for the most part, is a talking head who basically has given all of the duties that he's supposed to be doing to Ted Phillips. And the only thing Ted Phillips does well is sign contracts. That's from what I understand, the only thing that Ted Phillips does well is he's a great negotiator for contracts. You can find a million of those in front offices throughout all of the sports in this country. So I agree with you. I think you're right that ownership has to change. Honestly, dude, Chicago has all of our teams has a very bad ownership problem. When you look at what the Reinsdorfs have done to the Bulls and what he was getting ready to do to the White Sox, and then, you look at, obviously the Wirtzes haven't done too bad for themselves over the last decade or so, but then you look at, what those guys are doing on the north side and what they are planning to do this year with possibly, getting rid of everyone, and including, some of the best fan favorites from that big team. It's getting tougher and tougher right now to watch Chicago sports, and it has a lot to do with ownership, which is really shitty, dude. It's a really shitty thing. We are one of the top 3 cities, one of the top 3 markets in the country, and the fact of the matter is we have constantly fell short of goals on every single front, other than the Blackhawks, really. The Blackhawks have fell short of their own demands because they were doing so well for so long, but other than the Blackhawks, I mean, even that one, I'm not going to give any sort of relief to the Cubs because of that one World Series appearance, because you and I both know that was 2 outs away from going the other way, and so it's like, I'm sorry, man, I'm having a hard time, but yeah, I agree with you that the Bears right now have an ownership problem, and I don't see any way that happens unless the Hallis family themselves, not just the McCaskeys, but everybody that's involved, says, you know what, we've got some decisions to make about what's best for the franchise moving forward.
Yeah.
All right. The Bengals, Cincinnati, is hosting Andy Dalton and the Cowboys. What a disaster it's been for the Cowboys, man. that Washington game a couple weeks ago on Thanksgiving, and then last Monday or Tuesday night rather against Baltimore, where Baltimore was shorthanded, didn't look that great, and still came out on top. The Cowboys are banged up on the defensive side of the ball, have some issues right now as far as injuries, and they're still 3-point favorites going to Cincinnati. I'll let you pick first because I'm having a hard time with this one.
Yeah, I'm taking Dallas minus the 3. If Joe Burrow was playing, I would have said Cincinnati at home.
Yeah.
But Joe Burrow's not playing. This is not the same offense without Joe Burrow. So I'll take Dallas minus the 3.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? I'm not a huge Ryan Finley guy, but I actually am going to take Cincinnati plus the 3. I think in terms of what we're able to see on the defensive side of the ball, Cincinnati, if you ask me, has been more impressive than Dallas has, because remember, they were in that game against Miami last week for a long time, longer than I'm sure Miami was comfortable with, and Ryan Finley almost did his thing and won the game there. And it was only an 8-point game when it was all said and done. So they've given up the Bengals defense has given up 19 points or 20 or 19 points the last 3 games. I think if they can do that again, they can score 3 touchdowns on the Cowboys. So I'll take the Bengals in this one. Interesting matchup, AFC matchup. The 11-1 Kansas City Chiefs, and in my opinion, the best team in the league, the Kansas City Chiefs. They are going to be taking their talents to South Beach, Miami, 8-4. Coming off of what we just talked about was a close win. I think they're probably too close for comfort for most Miami fans. They thought they were going to go in there and steamroll the Bengals. It didn't happen that way. Same thing with the Jets the week before. Even though they won that game, it was still a little bit tougher than I'm sure that they would have liked. But that defense looks really good right now. But Jesus is going to come in there with is minus 7 points. Our Kansas City, and man, what a last couple of weeks has been for Kansas City. I mean, you saw them firsthand against Tampa Bay and how dangerous they can be output-wise. But that game against Denver, against a Denver defense that does pretty well against Patrick Mahomes historically, I think there was a couple of sort of missing pieces there. I know that the one thing I won't say too much about last week, they didn't have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think it was an illness at the last second, so they were rolling with Le'Veon Bell and Darrell Williams. But I like Kansas City in this game, even with the minus 7. I think they're able to take this one by more than a touchdown. Even though I like Miami in the grand scheme of things, I think Miami has more to play for, because I think Kansas City right now has probably got some eyes on the next couple of weeks and hopefully securing a seed that they can get a bye with. But again, I think Kansas City gets it done by more than a touchdown.
I'm going to take the Chiefs on the win, but I'm going to take the Dolphins plus the 7. Just because
Kansas City defense is no brick wall.
And Miami, and you mentioned it, I think Miami's defense has slowly but surely been playing much better over the last few weeks. So, and, the funny thing is that, Jesus struggled, for what it's worth, at home against Denver. Yeah. So now you're going to have to take your talents to the road, to South Beach, to take on Miami, who's a much improved team. They're much better than what they were. So I think the Chiefs pull it off, but I think the game's going to be close. So I'll take the Dolphins plus the 7.
All right. That will be an interesting game to watch. Let's head over to the Gigantes, New York Giants, 5-7 in first place. I mean, if it wasn't for, I think the one big thing for me was the Daniel Jones thing, but I think both of us, you mentioned it earlier, were really confident about that game last week if Daniel Jones came in. I'm not sure if I would have picked them, but man, that would have been a really interesting matchup. This week they will be hosting the Arizona Cardinals, who are going the opposite direction. It's been 4 in a row, going for 5 in a row for the Giants, and the Cardinals have lost 4 of their last 5, including last week against the Rams, which And by the way, the only win that they have in that 5-game stretch was a Hail Mary. So it's not like the Cardinals have done a tremendous job over the last couple of weeks. And likewise, the Giants, man, I mean, listen, Seattle's a good team, but, Cincinnati they beat. I think they beat Philadelphia, which I will still contend is the worst team in the league until they fire Doug Peterson. I don't care, who else is in charge, but Doug Peterson needs to get fired. And then Washington, which I think Washington's defense is for real, as we saw against Pittsburgh. But I still really, really like the Giants, and it looks like Daniel Jones has a shot to play. I think he's questionable, if I'm not mistaken. So it looks like Daniel Jones will be going in this game. Well, not exactly sure what his health is going to look like, but the Giants are in a really good position right now, trending in a really nice direction, and 5-7 with a shot at winning the division is all they really need here. I like the Giants, honestly, though. And by the way, it's Arizona 2.5-point favorites. So Arizona coming into a road game as 2.5-point favorites. I'm not sure how Vegas comes to terms with that one, given the recent trend with the Cardinals, but I like the Giants in this one, especially if you're going to give them 2.5 points. I like the Giants.
Yeah, that's almost a steal. I like the Giants plus the 2.5 too. And here's the thing. If we're going to play the what-if game, the Giants were one Evan Ingram
catch, yeah.
They're one Evan Ingram catch or drop away from winning that football game, the first one against Philly. And then they were one, whether you want to question it was defensive pass interference or not, against Tampa Bay from tying that game.
That's right.
Lord only knows what would have happened in that game.
Yeah.
So, the Giants could have been 6-6, or they could easily be 7-5. But I think they figured something out against that game against Tampa Bay, and whatever they figured out, it's rolled into this 3-game winning streak. I like the direction the Giants are going. And you're right about Arizona. They're going the opposite way. I think I know they have, I think if I'm not mistaken, they got a couple of injuries defensively. But offensively, I feel like there's too much emphasis on the air raid with Kyler Murray. Like, dude, there's a reason why you guys went out and got Kenyon Drake. Run the damn ball.
Mm-hmm.
I understand, the NFL's become a passing league, but we can't forget about the run game in the NFL, and I think Arizona's doing it right now. So they're putting too much pressure right now on Kyler Murray. And you're right, they're one Hail Mary away from really not even being in the playoff conversation. So I like the Giants. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. I'm going to take the Giants plus 2.5.
Okay, cool. And also to mention, it's hard to run the ball in that air raid formation, dude. Like, that's basically asking 5 offensive linemen to block 6 defenders because, you're so spread out at the end of the day. And they don't play too many tight ends either. It's just really hard to run the ball in that formation unless you have elite offensive linemen, which they do not.
They really don't.
Yeah. Right. All right. Let's talk Tampa. They're hosting Minnesota this week, and they are 7-point favorites at home. How's it feeling this week?
Bucks coming fresh off the bye week. Hell, right. There was not a team in the league that needed a bye week, maybe worse than Tampa Bay. Here's the thing about the Bucks, and it's not even so much the team, it's my fellow fan base that tends to give me gas from a time-to-time basis. I've never seen a team more negative about being 7-5 than I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah.
And what drives me the most nuts about this is okay, Tom Brady has one bad game. And for some reason, I got to have my inbox blown up for everyone to talk about fellow Buck fans, nonetheless, to talk about, it's not looking so sweet with Tom and this and that. Well, know your history, because if you would have seen the game against the Chiefs 2 weeks ago, you would have seen that most quarterbacks in Bruce Arians' no risk it, no biscuit offense actually play better in the second year than they do in the first year.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get a guy like Carson Palmer, who is very adamant about not giving up on Jameis, because he said, even I struggled my first year. But then once I really got the offense under my belt and everything, the next year we went all the way to the the NFC title game where we lost to Carolina. He's like, dude, don't give up on the quarterback. So you're seeing those mistakes with Tom Brady. But everyone's like, oh, I'm so nervous about going against Minnesota. I'm so nervous. Like, they could tear up our secondary. You mean the same Minnesota team who lost at home to Dallas and needed overtime to beat Jacksonville? You're nervous about these clowns? Come on, dude. The only thing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers need to be focused on is stopping Dalvin Cook and making Kirk Cousins beat you, which I don't think Tampa Bay, coming fresh off the bye week, is able to do. The only thing I ask Byron Leftwich is, remember, Ronald Jones is the fourth leading rusher in the NFL. When the Buccaneers won 4 games in a row, 3 of those 4 games, Ronald Jones rushed for over 100 yards. Give Ronald Jones the flipping ball. Stop being starstruck because you have Godwin and AB. And that's another thing, too. All of this, did Antonio Brown come in and ruin the chemistry of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? No, he didn't. Because Antonio Brown actually has been the Bucs' best wide receiver catching first down passes. The problem is when your offensive coordinator is too starstruck because you're seeing Mike Evans and AB and Chris Godwin and Gronk and Tom Brady, you forget that you're still possessing the 4th best running back rush yards wise in the NFL. Yeah. So once you realize what you got in the backfield to take the pressure off of number 12, because he's not the same spring chicken, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'm not nervous about Minnesota. I think Minnesota actually should be 0-2 in the last 2 games coming in this one, because Jacksonville played them hard enough where they should have beat their ass last week. I like Tampa minus the 7. I'm actually predicting Ronald Jones to have a big day because I don't buy Minnesota's defense, and I think Tampa's defense is just going to be just fine against Dalvin Cook. They stopped some of the best running backs in the game so far. I think Dalvin Cook will be no different. So I like Tampa minus the 7.
Yeah, I like Tampa too on both. Honestly, though, I was when I saw it was a 7-point spread, I was gonna go and see if Minnesota can cover those points, but they're heavily banged up right now. They're missing 2 out of their 3 tight ends are out, and the third of them is questionable. Irv Smith is questionable. Kyle Rudolph is doubtful. Hale Hentges is out. And then you got Eric Kendricks, one of their best linebackers, is out, in addition to already losing Anthony Barr. And their backup running back is out, too, Alexander Madison, rather. So, Vikings are pretty banged up, but this is a huge, huge game for the NFC playoff picture here. A win for the Bucs all but sort of gives them the inside track to one of those wild card spots, and it still kind of keeps them alive in the division as well, because it's not too far into the season where they can't make up 3 games with New Orleans. So there's still a lot of promise for the Buccaneers, and I think this is a nice matchup for them to beat up on and move on to the next week as well. So let's talk about another NFC South team, the Carolina Panthers. They're off of a bye themselves. They're 4-8 off of the bye, and they're going against the 4-8 Denver Broncos, who the aforementioned Kansas City Chiefs beat up on last week. I wouldn't even say beat up on. I mean, listen, 22-16. Against Jesus Mahomes and his guys, you're not taking that too tough. You're probably going back to the drawing board and saying there's some things we could do better, but you're not really beating yourself up about it. 3.5-point home favorites are the Panthers, but they're going to be missing DJ Moore. I know Denver's going to be missing some of their offensive line and a couple of defensive cogs, but honestly, I think right now, if you look at it overall, Denver has played better than Carolina has played over the last 5 weeks. Even though they have similar records, you have to remember Carolina gave up that game against Minnesota, where they basically depended on 2 defensive touchdowns to even keep them in the game. They did have that one game against Detroit, but otherwise they got spanked by you guys, the Buccaneers. They got spanked by Kansas City, and they lost that game against Atlanta too. Whereas Denver, you have to remember, Denver got that win, that close game against Miami. They won, and then next week is when the whole quarterback drama happened. They didn't have a quarterback, and they had to, play the Saints without one. And then last week they played what I think is the best team in the league and did a pretty good job against them. So I actually like I like Denver in this game. I think they cover with the plus the 3.5, and I really do think that right now Carolina has a lot of answers that they need to come up with here over the next couple of weeks because they started off really well, but with no Christian McCaffrey, this team is very limited on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, dude, and I'm taking the Broncos plus. You said 3.5.
3.5. Yep.
Yeah, I'm taking the Broncos plus the 3.5 as well. One thing about Carolina too, though, man, it's crazy. Christian McCaffrey got hurt in the second week against the Bucs, and this dude has been fragile ever since.
Yeah.
Like it was okay. He hurts his ankle against Tampa. They put him on IR, so he's out minimum of 3 weeks. Then they bring him back. He played maybe 2 quarters of one game. Next thing you know, his arm hurts.
Oh, yeah, he had to
then he's got the shoulder injury. Then he tried to come back and then re-aggravated. It just seems like then it went from shoulder to quad. So he went from ankle to shoulder to quad this year, and he just hasn't been right. And they miss him in that offense. Teddy Bridgewater definitely misses him behind the way or in the backfield there. But I think Denver, Denver's been playing tough. Their record may not show it, but like you said, they actually were winning that game against the Chiefs last week. But, when you got Jesus number 15 playing in red and white and Patrick Mahomes, they were able to come back and win that game. So, you got to give an A for effort for Denver. But I think in this game, the matchup favors the Broncos. So I'll take them plus the 3.5.
And I'm glad you mentioned McCaffrey because it's like, why even bring him back? You're not playing.
Yeah, what's the point?
You're not even playing for anything. You brought him back 3 weeks ago when you still weren't playing for anything. He hurts his shoulder, and then they're like, well, maybe he'll play next week. Shut him down. Shut him down. You don't. There's no reason for him to play. So I guess and that also puts him in jeopardy of next year because it's like, honestly, dude, if I'm just from fantasy perspective, I'm not selecting that guy number 1 overall next year. Hell no. I don't care how well he did. So, we'll see how that turns out for them. But I think we both like Denver in that one. All right. AFC South. The 1-11 Jacksonville Jaguars, who, by the way, their owner told that coaching staff they are safe through the year. I wish he was the CEO of every company during COVID. They would have just been like, you know what, guys? We're not making any cuts this year. Our production is down 50%, but we're keeping you guys all here, all right? But, Shad Khan clearly has money to blow because he is going to let the Jacksonville Jaguars do their thing as the struggling, I didn't think I would say this, with the struggling Tennessee Titans come into town to Jacksonville to face the Jaguars. Struggling because, they've won games over the last 5, but that defense has been, after starting off pretty well, defense has been really bad, and it showed last week against Cleveland. Cleveland, don't get me wrong, they have some pieces on that team, but to give up 41 points to an Odell-less Browns team, rather, that was bad. And by the way, the spread this week, it looks like it's 7.5 point favorites for the Tennessee Titans on the road. I think this is an easy selection in my mind. I think Tennessee finds a bounce back game. In Jacksonville, Gardner Minshew is all but begging for his job back, and Doug Marrone is like, no, well, and you've mentioned it too, Mike Glenn has not been the reason why they're losing games. He's just not. They are just lacking.
He's been the reason why
they're in games, right? Yeah. So they're just lacking too much on defense right now. We saw them the last 2 weeks almost win. And by the way, they almost won against the Minnesota Vikings, and then the week before they almost won against Cleveland, who just dusted Tennessee. So maybe it's not as what we say far apart as possible. But I still think Tennessee goes in there. They have too many veterans, and I think right now it'll be a bounce back game for Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry.
So you're taking them minus the 7.5?
I'm taking them minus the 7.5. Yep, pick them in points. I just think that they'll be able to run all over the Jaguars and put up a couple more touchdowns.
I'm gonna take the Titans in the win, but I'm gonna take the Jags plus the 7.5.
Okay.
So Titans in the pick 'em, but against the spread, I'm gonna take the Jags 7.5.
Yeah, that would make sense, especially the way that the Jaguars have hung tough. I mean, the last 2 games, they've only lost by 2 points. So, yeah, that makes sense with the way that they've hung in there. All right, let's talk about the Vegas Raiders, who in their own right have slid off even after that win against the Jets last week, where it took a last-second Hail Mary pass to save their season to keep them at 7-5. But the week before, that embarrassing performance against Atlanta, and then again that Kansas City game where they were very close right there and just couldn't close the game late in the game. And the one thing with the Raiders right now is their defense just it doesn't have enough. Their defense is
still
just
struggling.
Still struggling. They've got the offensive output to make up for some things. Darren Waller's an all-pro tight end. Derek Carr has come into his own. I don't care what anyone says about Derek Carr, by the way. A lot of people want to give him crap. They're talking about, John Gruden may replace him. This guy has been doing his job. The main issue with them was that they have a tremendous offensive line. They're supposed to be running the ball a lot, and they haven't been running the ball as much as they have to because they're behind, and their defense is putting them behind. And we saw what it's like when they play with the lead. They do a really good job of that, but it's been tough sledding for them ever since, and it shows that Vegas is noticing that because they're actually 3-point dogs at home as Indianapolis at 8-4 after an impressive win last week comes in, and they will be 3-point favorites in Vegas. And we talked about Indianapolis. I mean, the big thing with Indianapolis is that, they're inconsistent in their own right. I mean, last week against Houston, they didn't look that great. I mean, I thought Houston was going to win that game for the most part, and they showed up in the fourth quarter and did a good job, but they lost to Tennessee the week before that. They had that barely win against Green Bay in overtime with that Valdez-Scantling fumble, and then, they lost to Baltimore a couple weeks before that. So, honestly, I think I'm going to take the Raiders on the points here. I really think if you give them 3 points, they'll be able to win. But I still like Indianapolis. I just think it'll be right now. You know what? At home, I'm going to change that. I'm going to do both. I'm going to do Vegas on the points and the pick'em. I think Vegas gets it done at home in this one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
It's hard to trust the Colts defense right now. They've done such a good job
on the road too.
Yeah.
That's the scary part. If this game was in Indianapolis, I'd probably take the Colts. But you hit 2 points on the head. The inconsistencies of Indianapolis, and you're going to have to bring those inconsistencies on the road against the Raiders, who can put up some serious points. Yeah, so the only thing I would clown Vegas on is, how does that Salim Farrell pick look right now? At 4? You could have had Josh Allen at 4. Yep. You could have had Dexter Lawrence at 4, but you didn't even pick. They picked the third best defensive lineman of that
whole Clemson team. Yeah, right. Yeah,
and Salim Farrell, and it was either 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they definitely need defensive help. I think as time goes on, they'll get it. But as far as this game concerned, I think the Colts inconsistencies are going to make me pick the Raiders at home plus 3.5, which I think is another given.
It's weird. It's weird. Vegas is so generous.
Yeah, I think the Giants plus the 2.5.
That's easy money.
With the way the teams are going, I think that's a money pick. And I think this Raiders plus the 3.5 is another money pick.
Yeah, and the other thing about the Raiders is, like, Mike Mayock, other than the Josh Jacobs pick, those draft picks don't look too great. I mean, the Salim Farrell, he had a strip fumble or strip sack last week or the week before, but otherwise he is not an impact player and certainly not a guy that they had to take at the number 4 overall pick.
Mike Mayock is a guy who, don't get me wrong, he knows his stuff and everything, but sometimes you can almost be too smart for your own good.
True.
And I think you decide to pick Salim Farrell over even just a Dexter Lawrence, who was 50 times better than Salim on the same defensive line that you're watching the same tape on.
Yeah.
And you decide to go with Salim over Lawrence. So, yeah.
Sometimes being the smartest guy in the room is the toughest thing, right? Like Mike Mayock, constantly the smartest guy in the room, and you're like, he's thinking, this is easy money. I'm going to select Ceiling Farrell. Nobody's going to see it coming. Sometimes that doesn't work out.
No.
All right. Let's talk Seahawks, because I know we talked about them pretty extensively, but I really don't have much to say about this game other than if you're a big bettor, they're giving the Jets 14.5 points this week. So, I mean, that is excessive. When you consider that Seattle's defense is not good, I think giving any team 2 touchdowns is weird. I still like Seattle, but if you're a betting person, I would still take a look at what the possibilities are on that 14.5, because the running back position, they're a little bit shorthanded, are the Seahawks, and then they have some defensive questions as well, including defensive line. So honestly, dude, I'm going to take the Jets on the points here because you're gifting them 14.5 points, but I still like Seattle in the pick 'em.
I'm with you in the same boat.
14.5. I don't know what Vegas is smoking this week, but it must be legalized by now, because that shit, 14.5 points, no matter how. Listen, if we're talking Kansas City even, if we're talking some of these other teams with semi-good defenses but really good offenses, but Seattle's defense has been proven to be bad by now. They've got 3 good players. That's what Seattle is. They have 3 really good players, and then otherwise nothing. That's pretty much what they've got. Right. So I still think and by the way, Sam Darnold's back, and they look a little bit better. They look like more in sync with each other. He's definitely better than Joe Flacco. So I would say if you're a betting person, the Jets might be an intriguing pick, because you may be making some money off that one.
Which then leads me to a conversation that we might want to start looking into next week is, where do the Jets go from here? Because let's say if the Jets do go 0-16, and let's say that they do get the first overall pick.
Do you take a quarterback?
Already, exactly. The consensus already. Well, Trevor Lawrence. We got to get Trevor Lawrence. He's the guy.
Yeah.
Dude, Sam Darnold. Okay, I'm actually going to go off on a tangent here, because it happened with Tampa, and it's going to piss me off. Why does everyone think that when these quarterbacks come in, that within 3 years, within 1.5 years, all of a sudden these quarterbacks should already be in the Super Bowl, and they should have already been in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl? Have you never heard of rebuild? First of all, the problem with the Jets is because they fired Greg Williams.
Yeah.
Let me tell you that Greg Williams is not the issue per se in New York. You fired the wrong guy.
Right, yeah.
Because you should have got rid of Adam Gase's stupid ass a long time ago.
Yeah.
But you did it. Nonetheless, though, to just give up on Sam Darnold because you want to bring in Trevor Lawrence. See, everyone's going to bank on the fact that Arizona just did the same thing, where they bring in a new coach. The coach wants Kyler Murray. They get rid of Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen then goes to Miami. Wasn't even in the starting plans because Miami was tanking for Tua. So what does Josh Rosen do? The best decision he could have done when he was released, came to Tampa, sat on the practice squad, learned learn the offense. But what pissed me off is you get these Bucs fans, per se, who go, "Oh, Josh Rosen is a bum." Based on what? He almost got killed in Arizona under Steve Wilkes, who in 1 year proved he wasn't a head coach. And then when he went to Miami, he wasn't even there to win games because all they wanted was Tua. They just needed a backup for Ryan Fitzpatrick. And I was like, well, he was garbage in UCLA. Actually, he was actually really good in UCLA. So good that a lot of people had him over Baker Mayfield, who went first in that quarterback class. So to just want to give up on Sam Darnold because Trevor Lawrence is there, Trevor Lawrence does not make the Jets better. Getting rid of Adam Gase makes the Jets better. Maybe getting a true number one wide receiver makes the Jets better. Maybe getting a better running back makes the Jets better, but not getting rid of Sam Darnold. I think if they get rid of Sam Darnold and they draft Trevor Lawrence, they will rue the day that it happened.
Yeah.
I'm going ahead and calling that now. They will rue the day that it happened.
It's overreacting. That's what it is. I think what what you should do is, okay, you get the number 1 pick. You should start to look at some trade suitors, right? There's going to be a lot of teams who are going to be looking for quarterbacks next year. I mean, that's very simple. My team is going to be looking for one, and we're not even in the conversation, but there's plenty of other teams. Jacksonville would love to have that pick. I'm sure there's a couple other teams, especially, teams that have had underperforming guys. Even like, listen, a team like Detroit, right? Like, you have Matt Stafford, but you don't know what's going to happen with Matt Stafford. Team like Atlanta, you have Matt Ryan. You don't know what's going to happen with Matt Ryan. So there's going to be teams that are be clamoring for quarterbacks, and I think they should be calling them if that's the case. Let's talk MC North. The Detroit Lions, 8.5-point dogs at home. Vegas giving the Packers 8.5 points. Packers coming fresh off of a butt whipping of the Bears on Monday night, and then, or was it Sunday night? It was Sunday night, and then Sunday night, and then last week against Philly just wasn't really even fair. I mean, Philly just didn't have the. They don't have the defense to do anything right now with what Aaron Rodgers does, and they don't have the offense to overcome that, unfortunately. So I'm going to take the Giants. I looked at the big G. No, I'm going to take the Packers in this one. I have a hard time believing that the same Detroit defense that could barely take Mitch Trubisky is going to be able to take on Aaron Rodgers. So I'll take the Packers and both the points and the pick 'em here. I know 8.5 points is a lot, but I'm not really banking too much on. And I know Packers defense isn't that great, or not even as good as maybe the Bears defense is, but Detroit had a very, very tough time last week. Even though they did give up, did score 30+ points, it was mainly because the defense wasn't getting any help from their offense.
Right. I'm gonna take Green Bay, but I actually like the Lions plus the 8.5.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It is a lot, and I'm also banking on the fact that, again, no Matt Patricia, so you kind of change that. You change your coaching crew, and I'm not saying they're going to beat Green Bay, but I think they can hang in there because I think they're going to be much better prepared. But the way Aaron Rodgers is playing right now, I don't see Detroit in any way winning this football game. But I think they stay in the game. So Give me Green Bay, but I'll take the Lions plus the 8.5.
Yeah, anytime you give a team 8.5 points in a close game, you got a chance in that one.
Right. Right.
It's finally happened. Carson Wentz got benched. Jalen Hurts came in and basically was the only positive part about that game against the Packers. I kind of feel bad for him. I'll be honest with you. I feel bad for Jalen Hurts because he's going to be thrown into the fire and expected to do exactly what they need him to do from day one, and I'm not sure he's exactly ready for that. As New Orleans is going to go into Philadelphia as 7.5-point favorites. New Orleans in their own right has been on an absolute roll so far this season. They are 10-2, and they don't want you to forget about them as far as the best team in the league is concerned, because Kansas City's been thrown in there, Pittsburgh has been thrown in there last couple of weeks, but New Orleans, man, no Drew Brees. I mean, listen, we've clowned Sean Payton plenty on this show, and I clowned him about the Taysom Hill stuff. I thought they should have started Jameis, but for the most part, the offense has not been the issue for New Orleans at all. In fact, all they really need to do with that defense is get the ball back, run the ball, keep possession of the ball as much as possible. They've gave up 16 points last week to Atlanta, but otherwise 3 to Denver with no quarterback, 9 to Atlanta the week before, and then 13 to San Francisco, and then 3 to Tampa Bay. I mean, that is super impressive as far as the defense is concerned for New Orleans. So I like New Orleans in this game. I think it's going to be a tough one for Jalen Hurts in his first game, but I think it's a step in the right direction for Philly. I think this is finally what do they call it? This is the rope cutting on the guillotine. So Doug Peterson's got his hands and his head in, and this is just going to be cut the rope and down comes the guillotine because Doug Peterson needs to get fired.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. What's the spread on that game?
It's 7.5 points. Road favorites are New Orleans, so they're still giving a touchdown and a half to Philadelphia, but I don't know if that's enough for me.
I like the Saints in this game. If the Saints win, they clinch the NFC South. If the Saints win, they clinch. If the Bucs lose, they clinch.
I see. So it would take the Buccaneers winning the next 3.
Right, because the Saints have that 2-game
Oh, they have a
tiebreaker.
tiebreaker. Okay.
Yeah, so the only way the Bucks can win the South is the Saints would have to lose out, and the Bucks would have to win out, because then they'll put the Bucks at 11 and whatever, 5, and they'll put the Saints at 10 and 6. I don't see that happening. Philly is garbage, and the Saints, like you said, are on the tear. Dennis Allen's doing a great job with this defense. I like the Saints.
Okay.
Minus the 7.5 against Philly.
All right, I'll make this a really quick one for you. The Chargers are 3-9. They are probably going to be firing Anthony Lynn soon, and they are going to be hosting the Atlanta Falcons, who are 4-8. And Atlanta is a 1-point favorite on the road. I don't know what's going on right now. Atlanta won't have Julio Jones. I think this is a pretty tough game to choose, but I like the Chargers surprisingly. I think that given what Atlanta it wasn't able to do on offense last week against New Orleans, the Chargers have a pretty decent defense. Just their offensive line is garbage. Their special teams are garbage. Anthony Lynn can't do anything when it comes to time management. That has no sort of tact or any sort of this guy's a running backs coach, offensive line coach. That's what Anthony Lynn is. He's a great guy, but I'm sorry he's not a head coach in this league. But I still think that this is a really good opportunity for the Chargers because I think Atlanta is shorthanded. Like I said, no Julio Jones. He might be done for the rest of the season. They might as well just end his season. There's no reason to keep bringing him back for him to be questionable every single week. So surprisingly, I'm going to take the Chargers, and like I said, they're giving the Chargers a point in this one as well.
Yeah, I like the Chargers plus the 1 as well. I don't see the Chargers getting shut out 2 games in a row, but I do agree with you. It might be time for Anthony Lynn to go.
Yeah, and I like him. That's a tough part. I think he's a good personality. I think he has the right sort of mentality as a coach. But man, you can't make that. He reminds me a lot of Lovey in that way, where he does a lot of the right things with the players. But man, time management in this league is so damn important, and being able to call the right timeouts and make the right plays for your team so important. All right, let's talk San Francisco. They are hosting, and actually I say that in parentheses, they are hosting because they're technically in Arizona. They're not allowed to play in Santa Clara for more than likely the rest of the year, so they will be playing in Arizona, and they'll be hosting the Washington Redskins, who just came off one of the most miraculous wins. I wouldn't even say miraculous. They earned that win. That was a tremendously earned win against Pittsburgh, and I talked about them last week. I still think they're the best team in the NFC East, based on the fact that they have more offensive firepower than the Giants do. The Giants have a really nice defense. I think the Redskins have a nice defense. Redskins football team have a really nice defense as well. But the one main thing is that Washington has Terry McLaurin. They have Logan Thomas. We saw that on Monday night. They have Antonio Gibson, who was out of the game, but he can be a big factor for them. The one thing is Alex Smith. He's not going to overwhelm you with too much, but they are still dogs on the road, are Washington, as they go into Arizona to face the 49ers as 3-point dogs. They're giving 3 points to San Francisco, but San Francisco's defense is. I know Robert Saleh is probably going to be the next Detroit Lions coach. He's a Dearborn, Michigan guy, and I really hope he gets that job in Detroit. I think he would earn it, but I just have a hard time picking San Francisco, especially with that offensive line being as bad as it is, or banged up as it is, and having to face Chase Young and that offense or defensive line for Washington. I'm going to take Washington in this game on the road, both with the points and the pick 'em. I think they get it done by a touchdown or more.
Wait a minute, they're dogs?
Yeah. So San Francisco 3-point favorite at home.
Oh no.
Yeah, which is surprising.
I'm taking Washington plus the 3.
Yeah, Washington plus the 3 is another one where you might be wanting to think about putting your money down on that one, because 49ers defense has not been that great.
Right.
Best matchup of the week, possibly. 11. Actually, you know what? Monday night's not looking too bad either. But 11-1 Steelers coming off their first loss. They are going to Buffalo. Buffalo has been up and down themselves, but Josh Allen has been better at the last 2 or 3 weeks. I think we mentioned him about a month ago, taking maybe a step back in his progression. But really nice game against the 49ers, where he again just kind of did his thing as far as throwing the ball. I really still like Buffalo. By the way, Buffalo 2-point favorites, which is pretty surprising. So giving the Steelers 2 points, but the Steelers are going to be missing a lot of guys, including on the defensive side. No Joe Hayden, no Vince Williams. Their starting center, Marquise Pouncey, is out. I like the Bills in this one. I really do. I think the Bills have an opportunity to sort of make a statement. If anything, this is the perfect statement game for them to do on Sunday night in front of a national audience, to be able to be at home against what many consider the best team in the league. I think this is a really nice statement game for Buffalo. I think their defense finds a way to get it done against Pittsburgh. I think their offense scores a ton. I like Buffalo.
And what's the spread on that?
It's 3 points going to I'm sorry, 2 points, excuse me. So they're giving Pittsburgh 2 points on the road.
Oh, so the Bills are getting close to. Yeah, I'm with you. I like Buffalo in this too. I'm not the biggest fan. Okay, maybe I'm in the only boat on this one. You ever seen a college basketball team go undefeated during the season and they lose one game in the let's say they lose the Elite Eight, and everyone's like, oh, if they would have just lost the game, they would have known what losing is tasting like.
Yeah.
What kind of effing nonsense does that make? If all you know how to do is win, and you're going into a tournament where it's either win or go home, if you lose, it's not going to mean anything. So I never understood, like, people are actually saying to the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's great you got that loss out the way, so now you know what that loss feels like, so now you can move on. That doesn't make sense, dude. Week to week, if I have to win every week and all I know how to do is win, I don't want to take a loss so I know what it feels like. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in sports.
So
and it's the worst cliche announcement anyone can make in sports, where you're actually glad somebody lost. Like, if I was a Steelers fan, I would have been like, you know what? We needed to lose that game.
Yeah. Because
I felt like our heads were in the clouds. No, I would be like, no, I want us to flip.
I want us to win every game. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but with that being said, though, Pittsburgh did not look like themselves against Washington. I think they underestimated Washington, and that's why they lost. With Buffalo, you're right. I think Josh Allen's been playing well, and I think the Steelers take back-to-back losses. So I like Buffalo in this game.
All right.
But don't give me that. I'm dead. Pittsburgh lost.
If you would have known what it feels like to lose, and you could have won that game, what does that even mean?
Right. Like, I think what you call it was famous for that. St. Joe's.
Oh, right, yeah.
Because
they were constantly
Because I think what St. Joe's had that backfield when it was Delonte West and
Jameer
Nelson.
Yeah.
And I think they went undefeated, but they lost in like the Sweet 16 or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, you're right.
And tell me why, when they lost in the Sweet 16, people were like, see, if they would have lost the game in the regular season or something, then they would have known what the L feels like. Who gives a shit? They needed to win, and they flipped and lost, so who flipping care?
Yeah,
and I swear to God, dude.
There's always that. There's always that but if they would have won, it's like, no, dude, they lost. That's it. It's over.
Right, they lost. That's it. That's all we need to talk about. Like, what else is there to talk about?
All right. Well, let's wrap on this really nice Monday Night Football matchup as Cleveland 9-3. They are going to be hosting the Baltimore Ravens, who come in. I mean, listen, dude. I don't know what's going on with Vegas this week, but they're giving Baltimore 3 points. I'm sorry. They're giving the Browns 3 points rather at home. So -3 are Baltimore on the road. You know, Cleveland just got done beating one of the best teams in the AFC in Tennessee, and Baltimore barely, was able to squeak past the Cowboys. I wouldn't say barely able, but they didn't look like they were dominant in that game by any stretch of the imagination. So Cleveland looking for a bit of a revenge because they got blown absolutely out in the first game of the season against Baltimore. So I think Cleveland's looking for a little bit of a revenge game. They'll be missing Denzel Ward, their best cornerback, and it looks like Baltimore will get back some of the guys that they had lost over the COVID stuff. So Baltimore right now in a pretty nice position. It's kind of a must win for Baltimore because you can't lose this game and drop to 7-6, and especially lose it to a team like Cleveland, who's right there in the AFC wildcard hunt too. So honestly, dude, I like Cleveland in this game. I've seen a lot of shortcomings with Baltimore's defense, and I just don't trust their play calling enough. This is coming from somebody who's watched 12 games of Baltimore this season because I've had to, because I have Lamar Jackson in every one of my leagues, and that could tell you just exactly how shitty I've done in my fantasy season this year. That Baltimore has really screwed me over, but. Yeah, I like Cleveland, man. That defense, first of all, they got Myles Garrett back, which is huge for them. Getting Myles Garrett is huge for them. But even though they're missing Denzel Ward, I think they're probably not too scared of Lamar throwing the ball too much on them. I think they can stop the run enough to stop Lamar. And again, you're going to give them 3 points. If you're giving Cleveland 3 points at home, I'll gladly take that.
Yeah, I like Cleveland too. And I think the reason why I like Cleveland is what we said about Indianapolis earlier. Just the inconsistencies with Indianapolis. 1 week Lamar looks like a barn burner. 2 weeks now he looks like crap. And then 1 week he'll look like a barn burner again. And then he'll have an average game. But then he'll look like crap again. And it's just the inconsistencies is crazy.
Yeah.
Where I think Cleveland got a huge confidence boost in that game against Tennessee. And a lot of people had been thinking that maybe, just maybe, the Browns will probably be a better team without OBJ, because with OBJ's diva-like attitude, which most wide receivers have, it was kind of maybe deterring a little bit of Baker Mayfield. To look no further than last week that maybe these guys were onto something, because Baker Mayfield looked like, well, the Browns really haven't had that many great quarterbacks.
You look like
I was going to say Bernie Kosar. Maybe Bernie Kosar is like the last great quarterback.
Honestly, I'll give you an example here. He reminds me a lot of Favre, dude. He's got the Favre passion. He's slinging the ball. He's running 40 yards to go celebrate with his teammates. Like that is what when they picked him first overall, that's the Baker that they were expecting, right? The guy who can sling the ball at an accurate rate, not turn over the ball. That's a huge thing for him. To not turn over the ball is really big for Baker, and he didn't do that. So yeah, I see what you're saying. He reminds me a lot of like a really peak Favre with the Packers.
Yep, and I saw that last week. I was very impressed with him last week. So I think Cleveland takes this one. They'll put them, what you said, they're 9-3. Dude, how good of a job is it? Kevin Stefanski is their head coach.
Wow, amazing.
Like, how great of a job has he been doing this year? And the funny thing is, dude, Cleveland had the pieces.
Right.
You just needed the coaching staff that could gel all this together.
Yeah.
And they finally got it. So now it's no longer just Pittsburgh versus Baltimore for the North, and then Cleveland and Cincinnati is just banging it out for the cellar. Now you got to throw Cleveland in this mix. Now you got Pittsburgh, you got Cleveland, and this game, believe it or not, dude, is actually pretty huge for Cleveland, because if Pittsburgh loses and Cleveland wins, that puts them 1 game behind Pittsburgh for the North. So Pittsburgh could have gone from a full undefeated season where it looks like that they were going to walk to damn near within 3 weeks. As we're getting towards the twilight of the season, they could be in second place.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And if Kevin Stefanski is not coach of the year,
right? Yeah.
Then the NFL is a joke.
I was just about to say
They're
that
an absolute joke.
It's between him and Brian Flores, depending on how the Dolphins kind of find themselves over the last half of the season. But yeah, him and Brian Flores got to be right there, because you're right, dude. This is not like that much of a different personnel than they had last year. Like, Cleveland did not make a ton of additions to the team this year to take the step up. This is basically like 90% of the same roster they had last year, just different execution, different play calling, and they've done a great job. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting one, like you said, because they're 9-3. They can step into a possible AFC North crown. And by the way, next year that division is going to be a crazy one because you already know Cincinnati's going to come correct with Joe Burrow and making sure that they surround him with the right talent. They got a lot of money next year too, does Cincinnati. They're going to spend, I imagine, in free agency on the defensive side of the ball. Baltimore has a lot of decisions to make, but they're still going to be good. They'll still have Lamar. And you got the Browns and Pittsburgh, who might be the two best teams in the AFC right now. So that's going to be a crazy division next year.
Yeah. And seeing Cleveland in the playoffs is going to be nice because I think a lot of people are going to sleep on them because, it's just Cleveland. Dude, these ain't the same Browns,
Yeah, it's a different team. This is a different team for sure. All right. That looks like, man, we just continue to run marathons and we're not even sweating, we're not even panting, we're just over here like, Iron Man type behavior. But I know Steve pulled up our read for us because before we go, I want to just tell you one more time about rmtalk.com. We talked about it at the show's opening. Rolling Meadows Talk is a local news and offer website for the northwest suburbs of Chicago. It's got local deals, events, business directory, and much more. Check it out at rmtalk.com. That's RM as in Rolling Meadows Talk, TALK.com. We do our live shows in Rolling Meadows at Reps Place Sports Bar, as you guys know, and they have some really awesome deals going on right now. It is basically a get a gift card and buy a gift card and get a free gift card. So it's pretty easy. You purchase the gift card at Reps Place, you'll give them the promo code that you claim from the website, and basically if you buy a $25 gift card, you get $5. If you buy a $50 gift card, you get $10. And if you buy a $100 gift card, you get $25 extra just for claiming the offer at the RM Talk website. So again, just get the code from the RM Talk website and present that code when you get the gift card at Reps. And again, you will get a free gift card to show for it. So do us a huge favor. Again, we're really big supporters of Reps Sports Bar. We love them over here, and we appreciate their continued support. And we can't wait till the next time we can get back out there and do a live show. But again, it's rmtalk.com. Support our local small businesses, guys. Check out those local news and offers at RM Meadows Talk, TALK.com.
Yes, sir.
All right, my man. That was another one in the books. But next week, it's not going to get any easier next week because we're going to have NBA to talk about, even more NBA to talk about, more MLB free agency to talk about. NHL's going to kick off. We're going to be busy for the rest of the year, my man.
Hell right, brother.
All right, well, I'm going to let you enjoy, because you already know it looks like midnight outside right now. So, I'm going to go.
And like I said, dude, it was funny you was mentioning idiots driving in the rain, dude. Like I said, dude, it rained super hard yesterday. It's just been overcast today. But, yeah, dude. Texan drivers are freaking idiots, and the rain just makes it even. Oh my god!
They're like, "What is this wet substance coming from the sky? I have never seen it before."
Atlanta's famous for that one.
Dude, don't even get me started, man. I remember in 2000. Was it 2012 when they had the huge snowstorms across the country? And I was actually in Atlanta for work, and we got stuck in Atlanta for work. And I'm like, man, this must be crazy. Like, there must be, piles of shit on the highway. And they show the live feed, and it's like 2 inches of snow. And they're like, yeah, well, we didn't prepare for it. We're stuck at the hotel for fucking 3 days. Like, what's going on? So, yeah, Atlanta's another one where they're like, we didn't know it snows here, bro. We know we're not.
Hilarious, bro. I remember they had maybe 0.2 inches of ice on the ground, and they had to call in this one of those state of emergencies because people were just sliding all over the place because they had no salt, sand, no nothing. I'm like, have you guys not been paying attention to the news? Right. There's a great chance you might get smoked. Yeah. Oh, it was hilarious. It's just like parking lots of cars. It was like that video, what's the REM Everybody Hurts video, when everyone's stuck in their cars and everyone just starts walking. I'm like, you guys can't be serious. So yeah, no, dude, it's just been raining down here. We haven't get hit with the snow tip yet.
Oh, okay. But yeah,
dude, it's ridiculous. Like, you have to be extra careful because people act like just because it rains, it's okay to still go the speed limit.
Right, exactly.
It is
right.
okay to still go.
I promise you don't have to go 10 under,
You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, dude.
All right,
So
brother.
no, I feel your pain, all the pain.
All right, man. Well, stay safe out there. All right.
Yes, sir. Y'all do the same.
All right, guys. Appreciate you guys supporting and sharing the show out. Continue to do that for us. Help us out. For Nick, I'm Mack. Steve's back there. We'll see you. Peace.
Okay.